OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
All right, let's get down to business. It's 7:30. It's Wednesday morning. Last night there was a game at Lansdowne Road. Colm is here. Colm, good morning to you. How are you?
Sure.
Shane is here. Shane, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, lads. How are things?
What was your experience, Shane?
Great win, lads. 3-2 win over Armenia. We stayed up in our League of Nations group. Scott Hogan nearly made it 4 as well with one of the last kicks of the game. Nothing controversial about the game. It's, I suppose it's a results business. No, to be honest,
it's a results business. We keep getting told. Yeah. So we just move on. Is that what you're telling me?
It feels like the cameras this morning are snipers, and every person who is anti-Kenny is behind those snipers this morning, waiting for any positivity around Stephen Kenny, which I understand because I'm utterly and positively confused after last night.
Well, isn't the case that everybody who had made their mind up before the game are more entrenched in the whoa, what's this going on here? There you go.
It's
the old YouTube ads. As I log on to YouTube to check the comments.
Yeah, of course, yeah, because it's going to go one of two ways. No, you're right, people are entrenched and they're going to be more entrenched probably after last night.
It's a Rorschach test. What do you see? You see the thing you always saw, right? That's do you see the chances that created, the domination of possession, the relatively intelligent play, the fact that we were in control of the game for 70 minutes, or do you see the calamitous, the habit-forming concession of goals? If you step back and zoom out, like, all of these things are true. We were bad in patches last night. We were good in patches last night.
Probably not exceptional, which is a word Stephen used in the post-match interviews.
No, I don't think Stephen Kenny's doing himself any favours with his performances in the press conferences. But ultimately, they don't matter. Trapattoni would sit in press conferences and tell everybody we were crap. Martin O'Neill would say we don't have the players and I don't have the time working with the players to achieve anything here, and that's why we're playing the style we're playing. And Mick McCarthy would bite your hand off for everything.
Does it not matter? It's our only insight into the management and what goes on behind the scenes. Having said that, you listen to Darragh O'Shea talking and he's saying Stephen and Keith Andrews came into the dressing room and weren't happy. And like that, he's probably going to downplay how unhappy they were when they came into the dressing room.
Who, sorry?
Darragh O'Shea chatting to Nathan after the match, he kind of made the point that Stephen and Keith Andrews, when they came into the dressing room, they weren't happy.
Yeah.
Which is,
so that's more important.
Yeah.
I think that's more important.
Well, it is, yeah. I think it's okay to be confused. I'm probably in the camp where I want Stephen Kenny to achieve. I want him to do well with this team, and I want to continue to enjoy going to Irish games, which I am at the minute. But I also see that period of 90 seconds was not good enough, and it's all too regular that we give up leads.
Just like Germany. No shame in it, being 2-0 up against inferior opposition, and we saw the game out.
Yeah, true.
Like Germany.
Yeah.
Did we see it out? Is that how you would say? Is that how you would describe that?
Lucky.
We stumbled.
I never thought I'd understand what it feels like to be George Best in my life. I was never any good at football, but famously George Best was at the Champions League final when it was 1-0 to Bayern Munich and left.
Yeah,
you know
of
this,
course,
right?
99.
So I brought my 3 kids to the game last night and sugared them up in the first half. And at half time, my youngest started slouching in the seat and kind of slide off it. So I was like, look, tell you what we'll do. We'll stay for 5 minutes and then we'll beat the rush. So Obafemi flicks the ball around the corner, turns and wallops it straight into our faces, basically. We're right behind the goal.
Yeah.
And then we go out and everybody's watching the penalty shootout. So I'm like, okay, shut up. Just stop giving out. We're going to watch the penalty shootout. And we're like, okay, grand. So we watch the penalty shootout, which is a disaster. It's not a disaster, but it's terrible for that team, and so close and whatever. And we're walking down the stairs anyway, and I'm like, oh, this is great. We are probably going to miss some goals, but that's okay. It'll be 3-0 more than likely. And then by the time we get to the train station, the train comes, it's 2-2.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so I didn't see that. I'm at a loss this morning. I unfortunately to beat the crowd, and because my kids were like
the opposite of Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't there.
You weren't there.
Now, I did listen to Nathan and Stewie in the last 5 minutes of commentary, which was just madness, and it was great.
Yeah.
So if you haven't heard their take on the penalty, it's definitely worth them.
There was a period of time, so when we left our seats in the East Stand for half time, we went out, watched the second half of extra time with all the other Irish fans. It was a good atmosphere. Everyone was enjoying the second half of extra time, albeit Israel were the better team in the 21s game. And then it went to penalties, and everyone kind of walked towards their seats again, saw the Obafemi goal. You're thinking, 2-0 in the senior game. The penalty shootout's about to start.
It's about to be the best 10 minutes of football that we've experienced as a nation in a long time.
I said it to my brother. I said, we're going to have a great time tomorrow morning talking about these two games.
And then it was the worst 10 minutes of football that we've had since Wim Kieft.
Yeah.
Sick reference, yeah, that's good.
It was shell shock after the second Armenian goal in particular. It was like, what? Because the first goal, you can kind of, you're like, right, Bazunu, reasonable save off the post, came out. Yeah, they were probably half asleep at the edge of the box, but it's 2-1. Ireland will go on and score another goal or two. We'll win 3 or 4-1. There won't be an issue. And then the Howrahan pass is just, what are you doing? Like, you're an experienced professional. Like, they say don't pass the ball across your own goal, but he literally passed it across his own goal to an Armenian footballer.
Not great.
Not good at all.
No. I think, so one of the things that Kenny could do is come out, and he said there was a mistake, but it's just a mistake, instead of like, I can't believe that clown did that thing. He's like, he's going to need Howrahan at some point over the course of his campaign. Midfielders pick up bookings. Like, I thought Malumbi was very, very good in the first half.
Yeah.
Being fortunate not to get the second yellow.
Yeah.
And that's why they take him off. I understand that as well. Like,
they had to take him off. It was silly, the pullback. It was a definite second yellow.
Yeah, or else he's got away with it now. You mean, you just keep him on, because his energy and drive. I think you were asking about Hendrick, and there was a bit in the first half, I think it was about 27, 28 minutes in, where it looked like we had decided to press.
Yeah.
But he wasn't part of the press, and so the ball kind of got passed around, and you're like, that's not great, because like either they're not as coordinated as we think they are, or he doesn't do that anymore. And maybe he just doesn't do that anymore. We shouldn't expect him to do that.
The one thing I'd say about Hendrick is he seems to be particularly singled out for a poor performance. I'll give him one bit of defence, was that he was trying a lot of forward passes. The problem was they were incredibly inaccurate.
Was the whole conversation not about him, that actually we need somebody who isn't just passing forward? So instead of being...
Well, he wasn't aligned to the rest of the team, what he was doing.
He's supposed to be our Thiago.
He was trying to be incredibly positive. It's as if he's either listened to the criticism or someone directly told him, Stephen Kenny or otherwise, play forward. But it wasn't aligned to Malumbi's more considered play. And I thought he stood out a mile. And also, I thought Doherty had quite a good first half. But when I was watching, I was thinking, we're learning absolutely nothing from this game, like, at all. Because Armenia, for the first 70 minutes, was one of the worst displays I've ever... They're like, I know they're 92nd in the world, and they're supposedly the minnows of this group, but they were way worse than that. They're on paper. They had absolutely no ambition whatsoever. Yeah. They won a corner, I think, in the 41st minute, and it was a lucky corner, soft one. And I was like, wow, this is the first time we're going to see them, and we probably won't see them again. And I feel that not just the players on the pitch, but the whole country lost concentration midway through the second half after Michael Obafemi's goal, which coincided exactly, as you say, with the penalty shootout in the 21s.
Yeah.
And watching it on TV, you lads read it, but watching it on TV, you could almost hear people talk amongst themselves. And then I was thinking, if this finishes 2-0, we're probably still having a similar enough conversation to today. But now it's become a bit more catastrophic because of what happened.
I think that loads of people had decided that they don't think he's the man for the job, and there's enough evidence in those 5 minutes to give them comfort to continue saying that. And like, here's the thing: he's definitely going to get he's definitely going to get the start of the Euros campaign, right?
Yeah.
If we get hammered in the first two games, then maybe the FAI make a decision that they want to go with somebody else for the rest of it. But more than likely he'll get to see the campaign out, and that's the bit where when are the lessons learned? Damien Delaney is asking. Well, they have to be learned immediately, because the next qualifying campaign is a short, sharp shock, and at the end of that we'll know where our standing is and whether or not we're going to be in a playoff for the Euros.
Well, this is where Stephen doesn't do himself any favours either, in that his post-match interview he said, I don't see the players now until
November.
Until November, so I can't really give out to them about this match and kind of address things. I understand what he's saying. He doesn't have the team to kind of put this right. We don't have a game in 3 or 4 days' time to address the issues from last night, but you can't be coming out saying, I don't have the player.
Well, I guess, right. Do you do your best work when you're being shouted at by somebody, or do you do your best work when somebody says, "Did you do well there"? Do you?
Yeah.
How do you value? What Conor? What do you think about your performance tonight? How would you rate it? Are you happy with it?
And Howrahan, look,
do you feel good about it?
Yeah.
What's he going to say?
He knows himself what.
But if you shout at Conor Howrahan and he goes back to Derby and is a bit like, "Oh God, life's terrible," what's the? I don't like
the others.
Maybe they did shout at him. Maybe
probably did.
Maybe Keith is bad cop or Keith is good cop. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I just. Asking the management team to be performatively angry, that's like...
I think we're having the Kenny conversation far too commonly, and look, I think we should be having it this morning. Of course, we're having the conversation this morning after last night's performance. But when do we not have that? Like it's so it wasn't Stephen Kenny's fault that Conor Hourihane puts the ball across the area. Obviously, there are issues with the Irish team in terms of taking a lead, and especially taking a 2-0 lead against a team like Armenia. You have to be seeing those games out. I would have been happy with the 2-0 at that stage.
Let me get some of the comments that are flying through. Good to see the Ireland team back in green, says Dave Baste, who is either talking about the Gillette Labs performance rankings of a Monday or the fact that we're actually wearing green jerseys again. It could be either. Shano Sano 210. What's Terry Venables up to? I turned the game off at 70 minutes and went to bed happy with how the game was going. I woke up 3-2 and saved by a penno. What happened? Asked Michael. I'm asking myself the same question, Michael. It might be a while before I bring the kids back to a game. Owen McDermott says, at the end of the day, the match-going fans are behind him. The players are behind him too. The moment either changes, we can have a debate. What the media or ex-players think is irrelevant. You have what you think is something different.
Yeah, well, listen, a lot of ex-players aren't in the Stephen Kenny camp. I did notice, and I don't know if anyone else at the game noticed this, that when the Armenian equaliser goes in, I noticed Stephen Kenny's face pop up on the big screen and noticed a fairly loud chorus of boos.
Yeah, that was surprising to hear.
Now, I don't know if the chorus of boos was centred around Kenny popping up on screen or the fact that we just conceded an equaliser and we're facing potential relegation from our League of Nations group. If we conceded again, I don't know, but there was a tension in the air after the equaliser for sure.
One comment there by Brian. They scored 2 random goals from nothing. That's so true from a TV perspective. So I paused their first goal and watched it back a couple of times. Yeah. I just wanted to see where the goal came from, where the mistake was. Then I fast forwarded 2-2. I saw it when I did a fast. I'm like, what?
It did come from nowhere.
Okay, Nathan Murphy. Good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads.
You were in the maelstrom last night trying to process in real time.
Oh, God, it was hard to process in real time what exactly had happened. I came home and tried to watch back some of it to go through to 2 goals and see where the breakdown came, because it came from absolutely nowhere. Armenia showed no ambition at all. They were a team in crisis, understandably considering their run of form, and it looked as though they'd be happy with 2-0. And then they showed that they wanted to go on the attack and that they had the quality to open Ireland up. How they were so easy to get through. It felt as though Ireland had maybe just lost the run of themselves. Stephen Kenny said last night that he felt the overlap in centre-backs at 2-0. Do you need to be doing that? It felt right at the time. Are we going to stop Nathan Collins flying and forward up the pitch, bombing forward? Maybe the cover just wasn't there. And then the second goal, Conor Hourihane makes a shocking mistake. I think Gavin Bazunu could have done better on both goals. But I'm not surprised by what Shane's saying as to what the reaction was after the second goal. You're 2-0 up against Armenia and it goes back to 2-2. Nobody is going to be satisfied with that. Nobody is going to say, well, give them more time. You're in the middle of a match. Emotions are high, understandably. People are going to be incredibly frustrated. And this debate, I think you're right. Everybody's views are going to be a little bit more entrenched as to what they feel about Stephen Kenny. And a comfortable win last night, and he can probably relax a little bit over the Christmas. But now, a lot of pressure is not just on that draw, but also the way the fixtures roll out for next year and the qualifiers. Because in March, he's going to need results, and understandably so, and rightly so. An Irish manager should be qualifying.
Are we strong in March? Are we traditionally always strong in March? Is that a thing?
Will players be playing football? Will Matt Doherty have gone out on loan? We have a backup for Josh Cullen, whose reputation was probably enhanced somewhat again last night, that there is no natural replacement, while Conor Coventry is sitting on the bench at West Ham and not getting any football. So for 70 minutes, it was fine. It was grand. The midfield is definitely an issue. We don't have that player still who can unlock a defence, and we don't have a striker who's going to score a lot of goals. So that is going to be something that constantly hampers the progress of this side. But I thought they played quite a bit of nice football. They were totally comfortable in possession, totally dominated the game. But yet again, big moments in matches are undermining any of the progress that Stephen Kenny is making. And you look at the last 4 games, Scotland twice, Ukraine and Armenia, and 7 points is not a bad return. They've played pretty well in almost all of those games, but it should have been a hell of a lot better. And that may well be Stephen Kenny's legacy, that what might have been, what could have been, and he's helped the team progress, but they're not getting the big results when they need them.
Yeah.
I know they got the victory last night, but again, this should have been an easy conversation post-game at 2 or 3-0. And instead we're looking at, and I think questions should be asked as to what happened, as to the substitutions that were made. Like, have they lost the run of themselves because they have a manager who hasn't instilled the necessary discipline in them when they're 2-0 up to be patient?
It was confusion leaving the stadium because a lot of Irish fans, myself included, were like, what? I didn't know how I felt. I think a lot of people had to go for a pint after the match to process what had just happened. And it was a case of, well, I mean...
You're in your 20s. You don't need to justify a pint, Shane. It's fine. It's okay.
I went home.
It was an excuse. But like, it was one of those things you're kind of left like, well, that was better than a 0-0 or a drab 1-0 4 or 5 years ago. I actually weirdly enjoy that experience.
That's what I was saying to you.
You should listen to...
That's what I was saying to you.
Listen to Stewie Byrne, the roller coaster, and how it feels alive.
The last 2 games, 2-1 and 3-2.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at it from an entertainment perspective, like,
well, we sorry, like, you're going to get hammered for saying that we're looking at this for entertainment. But the one thing, the caveat to all this, right? And myself and Shane were having the conversation about the press conferences and how it is important. And I'm saying actually it's not that important. It is important in the context of the Nations League. And he was asked about it on Virgin last night as well. About, you did say this was a winnable group. And we have finished where the seeding said we would finish, as opposed to outperforming the seeding. That's if he hadn't said any of that, he'd now be able to point to, well, it's the best we've ever done in a Nations League. We would have got relegated from this before, except they changed the rules. But he can't do that now. Like, that's the one bit where managing the message is actually important, in that you set expectations and you either over-deliver or you under-deliver. And we have under-delivered versus we're going to win the group, which, was kind of an unnecessary thing to say at the start.
But the hyperbole is killing him in lots of ways because it provokes a reaction. So last night he would be well within his rights to come in that press conference afterwards and say, geez, we nearly blew it. Like, just puff out the cheeks and say, can't understand what happened, made some inexplicable errors out there. We can't do something like that again. Almost did all our good work. But instead it was over the top in the praise of the quality of the performance. And like, is that the inexperience? Is that the intense pressure he was on from the start, where he's had a feeling that every opportunity he has in front of the public, he has to react and go over the top because he knows the criticism is going to be so intense and insane on the other side?
Yeah.
So we have this constant battle, whereas he's clearly protecting his players. He clearly feels, I'm not going to be publicly critical of this group of players. Whereas last night, like, it's a free hit. Like, Conor Hourihane, I couldn't have any issues if his manager comes out and says,
I know,
like,
but he's going to need
one of my most experienced players.
He's going to need Conor Hourihane at some point.
What's Conor Hourihane? Like, Conor Hourihane's not... Is he going to throw his toys out the pram when they get back to the team hotel? What were you doing having a pub at me for?
No, but his confidence might dip to a point where he's useless to you.
But he could have phrased it.
That can't happen.
He could have phrased it. Well, Conor knows himself that was a bad error. Do you know, he could have left it like, Conor doesn't need me to tell him that was a terrible mistake. But like, Kenny, like, you can see the cogs in Stephen's mind when he's up on the big screen with a few minutes left and it's 2-2 before the penalty is awarded, and you're thinking,
well, there was reporting that was the end of his job. If Armenia got a winner there, that was the end of his job, according to some of the reports. No, I didn't see them verified anywhere. I didn't see anybody on the record with that, or anybody even off the record with that. So
no, and things will change quickly as well. I think that there's no suggestion that anyone involved in the board feels it's time to change manager or has a desire to change manager. But if you're 2-0 up against Armenia with 20 minutes to go and you were to end up losing 3-2,
not a good look.
Martin O'Neill, Giovanni Trapattoni. But you're right. Like, the entertainment is important. Like, people are enjoying these matches, and entertainment won't be enough though when it comes to the qualifiers. But maybe they can get both by then. Like, they did win the game last night. We were hammered on Monday because it's all about results, lads. Last night they actually did manage to win the game. Now it's all about performance. Like, they need to somehow combine the two at the same time. And listen, these games have never been easy. I, in preparation for commentary yesterday, was looking back on a decade ago, Ireland, Armenia. The only other time Armenia have come to town, it was a playoff of sorts as well. It wasn't a relegation playoff. Ireland needed to win this game to earn a playoff for Euro 2012 at home. Usual star-studded Ireland team of the time with Shea Given in goal and Richard Dunn at centre-half. Unfortunately, an injured Robbie Keane, but plenty of quality players in there, including Damien Duff. What happens? The Armenian keeper gets sent off after about 10 minutes. They scored the most ridiculous own goal you have ever seen. Richard Dunn puts Ireland 2-0 up in the hour. We've got one of the most successful, one of the most experienced managers of all time, and a great Irish side with loads of talent Surely they have the experience. Surely that manager knows how to see this game through. What happens? 2 minutes later, Armenia score. And next thing they're attacking down to 10 men with nothing to play for, away from home against this really strong Irish side. Like, these things do happen in international games. Like, nothing, it was the exact same scenario where you thought this game had to be done, but it wasn't. But like Trapattoni himself would admit, he was a lucky general. Stephen Kenny, because of these moments going against him again and again and again, he needs to put a stop to that.
Yeah,
And
maybe this is it. Maybe, you know, and I so in that context, I can see he's going into the change room going, well, we were pretty awful there, but we got lucky at the end. So maybe our luck has turned. And instead of like lacing into the players, because they all know, like you don't need to shout at somebody to tell them they've done bad. Like that just doesn't work as a.
Yeah, it doesn't. Look, Nathan, you mentioned 2 previous managers there and a previous era. You've been covering Ireland for a long time. Where does Stephen Kenny's football rate in terms of entertainment value, in terms of progressive football for you? Just for you, as a journalist and
I
as a man?
think the consistency of the last 4 games is something we haven't seen in a very long time. Quality of football is a dangerous term because we have to remember the players that we're dealing with here right now. It's not top quality Premier League standard. It's not Nations League A standard of football. But in terms of trying to do the right thing, the pace of the games, like that's the biggest difference right now, is the pace of the games. That generally when Ireland are playing well, as they did in the first 50 minutes and for a good chunk of the second half, like there's an intensity. They're trying to get it forward quickly. Say Jeff Hendrick's trying to do the right thing. So I think there has been a noticeable change in the way Ireland play football and approach these games. There is a question mark about the quality at times. Like Hendrick didn't do enough last night. Jason Knight didn't do enough in an attacking sense last night. Parrott wasn't really in the game at all. Like the quality of some of the goals, even the individual goals they've scored, has been exceptional. So I don't think anyone can watch the last 4 matches and say that Ireland aren't playing a better brand of football. But now is the time, heading into Euro 2024, where they have to back it up with results.
Yeah,
I think Stephen Kenny understands that.
Let's hear.
I'm sure he must understand that.
Yeah, well, it's been rammed down his throat every time he opens the papers. So let's hear from some of the players. Is Obafemi, Brady, and O'Shea talking about Nathan in the post match? Have a look.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I feel like we was completely stunned. It was come out of nowhere. We was completely on them the whole game. But I mean, obviously, I feel like it was just a lack of concentration. Started from me. A few sloppy touches, but just like I said, thankful to Robbie for bringing them the 3 points.
There's a lot of young players in this squad. 7 under 23 started again tonight. Can you expand on that lack of concentration? Is it experience? Is it being 2-0 up at home, cruising, sort of losing the run of yourselves even a little bit?
I mean, yeah, like you said, we've got 7 under 23. Like we're still a young team. Not a lot of experience, but I mean, a couple of the boys have played a lot of games for sure. But I feel like sometimes these things happen. But I feel like the boys, we bounced back. Like I said, thankful to Robbie, and that he could put away the penalty. So yeah.
Obafemi's undroppable now. He's our number 1. He's our leader. He's our hope. Let's put everything on his shoulders so that when he eventually lets us down, we can blame him.
Yeah, like there's not many Irish players already who have the quality of goals that Michael Obafemi has. It was just a brilliant finish, and the confidence that he spun away,
it was
knowing
great.
exactly what he was going to do.
Well, so as I was saying, I maybe missed up. I was like, we were behind the goals for it, and you could see like all he has to do here is hit it. If he can just do the thing that you know that he can do, it's going to be a goal. And lo and behold, he did the thing, which, like, you know, in a lifetime of watching sport, frequently you get let down by people.
Happen?
Well, like Dara O'Shea's had a free header from a corner about 5-6 minutes later, and it was a really good opportunity. You know, maybe I'm asking too much for that to hit the target again, but that was a free header. Like, anyway, sorry, to go back to Obafemi. If you're his club manager, you're putting him back in the team and you're riding that wave until he gets his move, wherever he gets the move to. And I think he's going to be a success. Like, whatever the issues were that were holding him back and have held him back at a couple of clubs now, you hope that he just begins to iron those out and play some football.
Yeah, he needs to get whatever's going on with his agent and managers sorted. I asked him at the end about Just that this guy that we see for Ireland doesn't seem to be reflected in the media over in England, that, you know, he's basically seen as a troublemaker. You know, understandably denied such a thing, but he needs to play a lot of football and also needs to stay fit. Like again last night, was it a bit of cramp? Was it a bit of a niggle? You remember against Scotland, he came off, he was injured, he couldn't play against Ukraine. To be able to rely on him to make sure that he is fit for these double headers and he's able to play the full 90 minutes of both games is going to be important. And himself and Troy Parrott didn't link up particularly well, but he has a dynamism, I think, that even Parrott doesn't have, and that we probably haven't seen in an Irish striker in quite a while. So, you know, Obafemi was one of the positives of last night. Like, again, I haven't heard too many people explain, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot from the pundits over the next while. You know, Gary Breen probably did it best at the weekend of explaining actually tactically what's going on, because it's all the bigger picture stuff, and we're as guilty as anyone of the bigger picture stuff. But in terms of team selection, like, was there anything he did wrong? I hear a lot of, Jeff Hendrick shouldn't have played. Jeff Hendrick's a good player. Like, Jeff Hendrick's a very experienced player. He should be better than he was last night. He's also playing first-team football as well. But if it wasn't Jeff Hendrick, who are you putting in? Who is the guy that's been left out? Should it have been Alan Brown? Should it have been Conor Hourhan? Like, there were calls for a bit more experience in the side. Like, the two guys who have let Stephen Kenny down, shall we say, in the last few games were two of his experienced players. It was Alan Brown inexplicably handling the ball, something you would never expect him to do. And then Conor Hourhan, who's as solid as they come. You know, the criticism of Conor Hourhan at times is that he takes it too easy. He plays it too simple. Comes on, you know, he's 31 years of age, and it's just a complete meltdown as to what happens there. So the younger players, by and large, are delivering, but they're not quite, some of them, at the absolute level that Ireland need to go and totally dominate games and cut open sides. Like, complacency was a word used a lot last night after the game, and like, do we just not know how to play against teams that we should be beating? Like, as in finishing them off. Like, it's all well and good playing against the Portugals, the Serbias and Scotland and getting up for those games, but why can't we just stand on the neck of these teams?
We don't have belief for 90 minutes to play football that way. We can do it in chunks. We did it for about 2/3 of the match last night, but they run out of steam creatively and mentally. I don't think they can keep going with it. Because people don't believe.
We can use the argument all we want. Oh, these are Championship footballers or League One footballers, but regardless of whether they're Championship footballers, they're still playing at a far higher level than the majority of the Armenian players.
Well, I saw an interesting point put forward yesterday that, are these players at club level used to playing that style of football ever, where they're the ones, as they were last night, with all the possession?
Well, Derby are
in like dominant teams.
Like Derby are dominating their possession-based team in League Two or whatever.
In League Two now,
One,
but
whatever.
Jason Nice played one game in that Derby team in midfield. He's played the rest of his games at right back, so he's not having to make those sort of passes all of the time. And look, it's Armenia. They sat right back. They're as defensive a team as we've seen come to the Viva. As you said, they had showed no ambition. Like, you're 2-0 up without them having a sniff. Bazunu had nothing to do. They've got their couple of goals. I think Ireland, if they hadn't had those moments of madness, they probably get a third, maybe a sneak a fourth, and then it's a run-of-the-mill, straightforward victory, and everybody leaves quite happy.
All right, let's talk a bit about Robbie Brady, who came in for James McLean. Have a watch of this.
Well, Robbie, I don't think you'll ever maybe top the goal in Lille, but that one felt bloody important tonight.
Yeah, it felt good. It was an important goal for me, obviously. It's been a tough road over the last 18 months to 2 years on and off the pitch. So there was a lot of emotion after that one there tonight. But like I said, a stroke of luck getting the penalty at the end after a few minutes of madness. We nearly shot ourselves in the foot, but I'm delighted to get the win.
Can you explain what happened? 2-0 up, cruising, and as you say, 2 minutes of madness. You know, you're a very experienced player. How does that happen?
I think when we dominating the ball for so long during the game, maybe we got a little bit greedy and chasing more goals, and we need to look at the bigger picture. We were 2-0 up, and we needed to make sure that we were more secure behind the ball in transitions, and we weren't, and we got punished for that with two almost identical goals. So we'll tweak that and make sure that it doesn't happen again. But like I said, we got a stroke of luck and we won the game. So
what are the last 20 minutes like then, as that's just happened, and you know the importance of, well, definitely not losing the game, but trying to go and get that winner? Yeah, we knew we would dominate. We're dominating. They got a bit of a lift from a couple of goals, but if we moved the ball the way we were throughout the game, I was confident enough that a chance would come. It's just about whether it goes away, and we managed to get a stroke of luck with the penalty and put it away. I don't think Stephen Kenny's ever lost faith in you. He name-checked you a lot when you were out injured. To get the start tonight and to have that moment at the end, considering all you've been through, can you describe what it means to you, probably to your family, to your friends, to everybody, to be out there having a moment like that again? Yeah, it means the world to me to be back in and wearing an Ireland jersey again.
obviously when you're out injured, I'm not sure if you can get yourself back in a place then, but I managed to get myself back in a place now where I'm feeling good and strong, and I feel like I've got a lot to offer, but I've got to put in the hard work now and at club level to make sure I stay involved and see how we go now going forward.
Yeah, was it a 50-50 decision? If dropping James McClain must not have been easy for Stephen Kenny, because he's playing his best football for Ireland at the moment. So what was behind that, and how well did he do?
He loves Robbie Brady. He has always spoken about Robbie Brady in glowing terms, and maybe the fact that Ireland were going to have a bit more possession, there wouldn't be the opportunities on the counter-attack that James McClain could expose, and McClain was really good on Saturday night and thinking those little balls behind the Scottish fullbacks. That Brady, is it fair to say, is a bit more cultured and a bit more control, and he probably had more touches than anybody, it felt like, maybe with the exception of Jason Malumbi last night. He got involved in everything, and he had a good game. He obviously set up the first goal from the set piece. There were a couple of other decent deliveries into the area, and you are reliant on your full-backs for a lot of creativity. Ireland's best stuff generally came down the wings when Doherty had the beating of his full-back. Brady didn't seem to quite have the beating of his full-back as easily as Doherty did, and I thought he had a very good all-round game, and if he can keep himself fully fit, he'll probably get a lot of game time over the next little while.
Which players for you, Nathan, have come out of these two games with their reputations enhanced?
I think Nathan Collins has shown again that he is very, very comfortable at this level. Darragh O'Shea did little or nothing wrong over the two games, and it does look as though that full transformation that started after the home defeat to Ukraine is nearing completion. Shane Duffy, Seamus Coleman have been dropped out of this team, barely featured over the two matches. So I think the two of them certainly enhanced the reputation. Jason Malumbi was really good for everything except, and maybe that's the entire every conversation is for everything except that bit. It was madness, and Stephen Kenny should have gone through Jason Malumbi after the game, because he's put a lot of trust in him in there, and there's a reason he's probably not starting in that position on a regular basis, is that he just seems to lack that bit of composure. He should have been sent off. So Malumbi on the ball, it was actually far better than I expected him to be in that role for Josh Cullen, but he's just too ill-disciplined, and you can't have a player like that in that position. Obafemi, obviously, I think is an automatic selection after his couple of performances. Matt Doherty, I thought, made one big mistake the first night, but generally played very well. Robbie Brady back in the fold. So are there players who did themselves massive damage? Potentially Troy Parrott, but he stuck with Troy Parrott all the way last night. And aside from that, I don't see a huge amount of calls and for players who have been left out to come in. What are the changes? Maybe Alan Brown can consider himself really unlucky, considering how well he played at right wing back, not to get a spot. Obviously, the few minutes he did play didn't go particularly well for him. But the Scott Hogan calls probably would have come through. I can guarantee you we would have had a Scott Hogan. He should have played the foreign player. Gets that one unbelievable opportunity to score a first international goal and doesn't take it. So team selection wise, I think it's okay. Do you need three centre backs at home?
Ogbenya was the name that a lot of people were kind of mentioning last night, certainly within the stadium. But is that a case of the way Armenia play? There's not much space in behind. That was a tactical thing, I wonder, Nathan.
You'd have to assume so. Ogbenya is the foreign man and played really well when he came on in Glasgow on Friday night. The only reason why you wouldn't bring him on is that Armenia are sitting back, that you can't use his pace in any way, and you didn't think he'd be able to make much of an impact. Maybe there was a plan to do something before the two goals went in and they had to rethink it. And actually, maybe when the two goals went in, it would have suited them because the game became a bit more open. But in terms of, the team right now feels somewhat set in stone. You'd hope that Conor Coventry goes out on loan in January and gets a run of games and can get himself in the squad, that Will Smallbone gets in the squad and they can add 2-3 players from that 21s to bulk it up. But selection-wise, there doesn't seem to be a huge amount wrong with what they're trying to do.
Yeah. Will we hear from Darragh O'Shea? One more last player interview. Have a listen to this.
A difficult one for a player to answer, but there's a lot of question marks about Stephen, a lot of criticism about Stephen heading towards Euro 2024. What's your sense as a player as to where this group is going under Stephen Kenny?
I think this group is going the right way, and I think if you look at our games and look at the way we've transitioned and played and the type of football we're playing, it's exciting. You look at the age of the squad, the players who are playing, and we've got players here who play for the next 10 years, which is massive for a country, do you know what I mean? So the more experience we can get, the more games we can get under our belt, and playing our style of football is only going to progress and help us. And obviously leading into a campaign, we've kind of had a good bunch of games now to prepare ourselves, and lots of lads are getting used to international football, which is great. But I think this team has gone the right way in training. The backroom staff, even around the hotel, everyone's been amazing, and it's a real positive moment. It's great. Everyone buzzes off coming in and playing for their country because of the atmosphere the gaffer sets and everyone around them. So yeah, it's a credit to him. And obviously, like I said, the more games we play, the better we'll get, and we just need to learn from our mistakes and push on.
Yeah, look, we were well stocked with centre backs. It would be interesting to see if we can play with 2 centre backs, just to see what that looks like. You can't really experiment between now and the end of the Euros unless we're out, at which point it won't be Stephen Kenny experimenting, more than likely. Let's hear from the fans. Aisling O'Reilly was out with the fans. Have in the aftermath. Have a look.
Thought it was okay up until they got a bit complacent, didn't they?
Yeah.
They got a bit complacent.
Too many mistakes, too quick follow, I'd say. They were a bit off the ball, you could actually say, for a while there.
And what about Stephen Kenny? Is he the man for the job? Should he stay on?
Kenny in, all the way.
The biggest mistake Ireland ever made was getting rid of Mick McCarthy.
Yeah, it was a good match, to be fair. I thought Armenia were a bit unlucky to get 2 players sent off. But, yeah, it's a great result for Ireland anyway.
So they were unlucky to get them sent off?
Well, obviously it's dissent, so it's deserved. But at the same time, you got to listen to the ref, haven't you?
70 minutes gone and everything just seemed to fall apart for Ireland.
Absolutely fell apart. You could feel the crowd turn. Everyone was booing. It was horrible, to be honest with you. I actually thought for 1 minute Armenia might come back and even do an England against Germany, but didn't happen.
And do you think that Stephen Kenny is the man for the job here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I couldn't pick anybody else for the job at the moment anyway.
And were you impressed with Ireland up until, I suppose, that 70th minute?
Yes and no. I mean, possession, a lot of possession, but possession doesn't count for anything unless you put the ball in the net. So they did okay first half, but they were a bit flat to begin in the second half. So
when Mick's dead, maybe.
Do you think that Stephen Kenny's the man?
Yeah, Kenny all the way. Kenny in.
Were you impressed with their play tonight?
It was good until midway through second half. They got a bit complacent.
All right, there's a bit of a loop there. We were caught in the time-space continuum. So Mick McCarthy Mark III, that's the alternative, is it? I keep Damien Delaney was like, well, it's not just Big Sam, there are other people out there who can do it on Virgin last night. It's just I don't know what the list is of the alternatives. I don't know who's on that list.
If it wasn't Stephen Kenny, and people go back to the debate about who should be the man to replace Martin O'Neill, and it felt like the public sentiment that got to John Delaney, that there was a sense that they wanted something different, and he sort of came up with this hodgepodge of McCarthy and Kenny. If it wasn't Stephen Kenny, Mick McCarthy would still be the manager right now. Like, that is the obvious scenario we would be in. And how many of these young players would have developed? Would be in a better situation? I honestly do believe that, and I know people say that Stephen Kenny is the worst record of Ireland manager, that whoever was in charge right now would in all likelihood have that, because there was a rebuild desperately needed. And these sort of, remember they did win the game last night, but these sort of debates have been coming ever since Euro 2016, because there's been a massive decline in results. Think back to Mick McCarthy's last campaign in charge and the lack of quality in both games against Gibraltar. Remember the home game against Gibraltar? It was an own goal and Robbie Brady scored at the last kick of the game for a 2-0 win. And it was brutal.
I don't remember that game at all, I have to say. I've blanked that whole period from my memory.
Impressed.
The away game was unfortunately a harbinger of that whole era and what it was going to be like. And look,
the confusion with me is I came home last night after the match, and you're catching up on some of the post-match reaction, and so I went from watching Damien Delaney talking about 3 wins in 20 competitive games, this isn't good enough, are we confident going into next March's games? No. And then I'm watching Nathan's full chat with Darragh O'Shea, where he's like, there's players in this team that can play for 10 years, which is massive for a country. So you go from being completely negative to, okay, yeah, Darragh O'Shea's actually made a good point there, and he's in the dressing room, he's full of positivity. So I think it's okay to feel a little bit of both, isn't it? Like Darragh O'Shea, Nathan, you probably walked away from that interview with Darragh last night and you probably felt a little bit better about the whole thing.
Yeah, well, it did feel as though he was taking responsibility as to what had happened. He wasn't coming out saying that this was an outstanding performance. He seemed, as Robbie Brady did, seemed quite downbeat about it all, that even though they got the victory, they knew that they had screwed up, that this was an opportunity to kick on, to end the campaign on a real high, rack up a couple of goals, and that they had blown that opportunity, and it's on themselves. But I think you're right. Like, it's okay to have mixed emotions on this, because results haven't been good enough yet. Performances have been getting better. but they need to get the two of them combined, and they need to stop having. We came away from Saturday night going, that was good, that was really good. We lost the bloody game. Came away from last night going, that was really good for long parts. How were we in a scenario heading into injury time where we weren't leading?
Yeah, okay.
So,
A couple of points here on that very point from our commenters, Super Ken 354 and John. All those pundits are all of a sudden worried about the performance and not the result. We weren't good in the second half, but they could have crumbled after that equaliser, but they got the winner, says Super Ken. John goes, all of the Kenny outers' main argument was that Ireland wasn't getting results, but now that we won, they'll point to the performance, which is the argument Kenny in supporters would use in other games. Damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Yeah, like the disappointment last night is that it's obviously a relegation playoff. And what screwed Ireland was the first day against Armenia. Likewise, what screwed Ireland in the last campaign was the defeat against Luxembourg. And if you look back in the last campaign, if Ireland had won that game against Luxembourg, they probably would have been right in the mix in that last match. And likewise, last night, it was an incredibly tight group, except for the fact that Ireland had lost against Armenia. And that sort of result is unacceptable. And that sort of result will kill them in the next qualifying campaign if they don't win their games against the lowest two ranked teams. You got to win those 4 games, guaranteed, win them easily, and then do what you've been doing against the better teams. So they can't afford any little slip-ups.
Just to play that out, if we'd actually beaten Armenia, still we wouldn't have been in it last night because of the Scotland result. But maybe at 1-1 with the game against Scotland, that changes how you approach those last 10-15 minutes. I don't know if that alters the substitutions and the tone and the music around it, but it would have been interesting to see what the pressure in a positive sense might have done to the team. So look, I mean, the relegation thing, it was real. The mood was he will lose his job in one of the papers that I'm no doubt is around the team hotel. Lose tonight and he loses his job. That has to get to the players at some point. So I don't know, they won a relegation playoff. It's one of our best ever performances in this competition. I mean,
that's positive.
There's never been a lower bar set than that.
If hypothetically in a different universe, if Armenia had gone on to score a third and win the game 3-2, like, are we talking hypothetically about Kenny's job being gone?
It's very, very difficult to...
That's the only definitive take. I feel like we're none the wiser a week later. Everybody feels the same as they did a week ago. But what's our consensus here? I was asking Nathan who stood out for you the last 2 games, and you listed loads of players legitimately.
Yeah.
And we had 2 exciting games, and we won last night. But it feels like it's a bit of a morning today.
Maybe our bar is so high.
I think there's entrenched views on both sides. The problem for me is I'm not sure the players fully believe in it for all the way through the game, maybe 2/3 of it. And I think we have that final third to go yet. So I do think there's actually a ceiling for him to improve a bit more. But the doubters are going to constantly remain if we're getting these results, unfortunately. I think the football is quite good.
Yeah.
And you made a good point here about, like, the players are aware. Robbie Brady will say he doesn't read the papers, but they are aware of the intense scrutiny that Stephen Kenny is under. And they're very young, inexperienced players who don't have to deal with anything like this sort of pressure generally at club level. And is that enabling them to play their best football? It's not going to change. They need to find a way. The pressure is always going to be high, and it's only going to get higher going into March. But they need to be able to cope with that. And I'd almost disagree with him. I think actually they believed in what he was saying last night was almost the problem, that he needed to just call a halt in 65 minutes and say, let's regroup, lads.
Right.
Let's get ourselves together structurally, whereas they sort of just seem to lose all shape, all discipline. And you're right, this debate is going to go on. But look, the Manchester derby's on the weekend. Everyone will be back to the Premier League. And, as I said last week, it'll be the week of the game before it all sort of pops up again.
All right, 14 minutes past 8. Nathan, good stuff. Thanks a million.
Thanks,
OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. The latest Koi Gig podcast is up with Kathleen McNamee, Emma Byrne and Karen Duggan talking about Manchester United's start of the season. The Koi Gig pod on OTB Sports is in association with Cadbury FC, official snack partner to the Republic of Ireland women's national team. We're going to be back with David Meyler for more on Stephen Kelly after this.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Have you subscribed to the OTB Football Podcast?
It was one of the most appalling performances from Bows. I saw them through the years when the money disappeared and they were teetering on the brink of going out of business, and there were scratch squads put together to try and get through a season and not be relegated, and that was the aim. And yesterday was worse than all of that.
Subscribe now to the OTB Football Podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts, and download the OTB Sports app.
Emma, you mentioned Man United as one of the teams that you thought performed well over the weekend. What did you enjoy about their 2-0 win over West Ham?
I just really like how they play. I like how they build from the back. I like what Mark Skinner's done, and I really like the players he's brought in. Like, it's just completely changed the team. They were a good team last year, but I thought they were kind of battling, and they were very good at like fighting for points and a difficult team to play against. Now I think they're a team that nobody wants to play, like, because they play fluid football. Lucia Garcia is a complete handful out there. Yeah. And you know, they're a really difficult team to play against, and they've got pace at the back, which, you know, so your long balls aren't going to work. They've got a really strong midfield. The weakest unit for me before. And they're extremely dangerous in attacking. And Leah Galton hasn't even got going yet. Like, when she hits her form as well, it's going to be both sides. So I look at them and I think, if I were to play against them, how would I set up? It's difficult. You're not going to be able to stretch them because they have that pace at the back. Just going to overload the midfield and try to dominate in there. And they're really good in set pieces as well. So I'm just looking to see how teams are going to play against them. And I'm really looking forward to see how Emma Hayes, because, you know, she's the master, the tactical master as far as I'm concerned. So I'm just wondering how she's going to do it in her system.
If your business relies on a van, that wouldn't sound good. But this does. Get up to 75% off van insurance. Now available in FBD branches nationwide. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. 75% no claims discount based on 5 years claims free. Available on new van policies used for farm or business purposes. Terms and conditions apply. Underwritten by FBD Insurance plc. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Right, 17 minutes past 8. David Meyler is with us. David, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, lads.
How do you make sense of what happened last night? What did you take away from the game?
Look, going into the game, it was a nothing game. Of course, I know that there was the threat of relegation. It was obviously looming over the result of it. But at the end of the day, Stephen was on a win to lose kind of. There was nothing really good going to come out of it. If Ireland had gone on and won 3-0, everyone would have gone, oh, well, Ireland are expected to beat them 3-0. They're 92nd in the world. We have a calamitous 5 minutes. Obviously, you can see the 2 goals, and then we get a slice of luck, which we probably didn't have against Scotland, obviously, with their penalty decision. We got one against Armenia. We get back in, we win the game. I think it was just, it kind of came to the point where that group needed to be over and it needed to be ended, and we just needed to make sure that we didn't get relegated. So now we can move forward to the draw in October and prepare for March.
So you're not taking too many lessons one way or another out of that game?
No, I was watching the game, just like, look, we were completely dominant, and they sat right off in a low block. You know, obviously you could see with Stephen's game plan, you know, the 2 wing backs were going to obviously be high forward, try and get crosses into the box. You know, obviously the outside centre halves were joining in. It was all very good and well. We were getting into very dangerous areas. We weren't creating a whole lot. A lot of our it was a lot of set pieces that our chances came down to. But at least there was a positive kind of influence on the game. We were, pushing them right back. Obviously, like I said there, you have that blip in concentration with the complacency, and we can see 2 goals. But like, it comes down to like, what side of the coin are you on? Are you in favour of Stephen, or are you not in favour of Stephen? There's a lot of noise coming from both sides, from 2 different camps. At the end of the day, that game, like I heard the lads mention Damien Delaney had obviously said, look, it was a wooden spoon match. That's what it was. There was nothing coming out of the group. We just needed to get a win, get over it. Obviously, I know they got the friendlies in November against Malta and Norway. But it's all about the qualifying group for the Euros, and that starts in March. He's bedded a lot of young players in. They'll have taken a lot from the last kind of Nations League campaign. Like, you look at how many of them are still 2021. They have a lot of learning to do. There's probably that lack of experience with them. Obviously, they do have some experienced players, but albeit a lot of them aren't on the pitch at the same time. So,
David,
there's not a lot you could take from it.
No, like there's been quite a substantial bit of negativity from some of your fellow ex-professionals, you know, and teammates, I guess, as well around Stephen Kenny and what's happening. You know, 3 wins in 20 competitive games and all that. And Damien Delaney on television last night was kind of pointing out we can't take much confidence into March. Even like I was messaging a good Monaghan man, former Irish international Jonathan Douglas last night, and he was saying to me, fed up reading we are going in the right direction. We're going nowhere fast. Like a lot of ex-professionals are taking that line. That do you kind of agree, or can you see where they're coming from? That there is a lot of negativity around Stephen at the minute.
Oh, of course, but Stephen's not excluded from that because he is the Irish senior national manager. He's going to come under criticism. He knows that, but like Damien said the other night, like it's a results business. He gets a result. He's won the game, albeit the performance wasn't fantastic. But if anyone had said going into the Armenia game they weren't confident going into March, fair enough. But whether Ireland had won 3-4, 5-0 last night, would you have been any more confident? Because Armenia are 92nd in the world, so it was a nothing game. We just needed to get a result, get the victory, and just move on. Like, of course, there's going to be people who want it here and now, but unfortunately, that's not going to happen. Like I said initially when he took over, listening to his interviews, there is a long-term vision with him, which I appreciate. A lot of these young lads, like you look at them, they're still 2021. They're carving out, their careers. A lot of them aren't playing regular football. They're not at the level that we would have, we'd obviously love to see them play. But there is positive throughout the thing. It's just when you come down, you minimise it to results only. It's not been fantastic, but I don't think Stephen would shy away from that.
From a tactical perspective, are you seeing an evolution in the style of play that at least suggests that the plan that they're trying to build on is being carried out? I guess that's one of the things you can kind of say, although albeit it's a nothing game, the shape of the team should begin to emerge over the period of, say, the last 3 or 4 games in particular. Post-COVID, everybody's back normal, there's fans in the stadium. Like if we take that as a kind of a point forward, I mean, certainly I'm not ignoring the previous results because you can't do that, but if you take it as, okay, this is like a reset button, is there enough of a trend there that you're saying, okay, this team is actually quite well coached, I understand what they're trying to do, I can see what they're trying to achieve, they might not always be great at it, but I'm going to mark them now on the basis of the plan, at least, that's in place?
Yeah, and you could tell from the way that they're playing. Obviously, Stephen has adapted this 5 at the back. I know he didn't really play it at Dundalk. He said he played it previous jobs. But certainly with the personnel we have, you can see that they're working together. They're obviously practicing on the training ground. They're going through it. Players look comfortable. I think Stephen now is at a position where he kind of knows his starting 11. Obviously, I would have put Ogbene higher up in the pecking order. I was surprised he didn't feature last night. I don't know, was there a knock or something? But he seems to have that, 11 players guaranteed that he thinks is going to start. You can see from one of his interviews about Josh Cullen, obviously, who's suspended, that he was an integral part of their team. You can tell by the, the type of player he is, certainly with keeping possession, kind of keeping things safe and tight. In front of the back 5 or the 3 centre-halves. Certainly there has been a shift in the way he's trying to progress Ireland and the way they're playing. And look, from the outside looking in and from mumblings I hear from different players, they've all bought into it. So that's a positive, but it's just, regardless of however last night, I don't think there would have been, if Ireland had won 3 or 4-0, I don't think there would have been a lot more optimism this morning.
Is the midfield a concern? Like you mentioned Josh Cullen there, and it was quite glaring that he wasn't on the pitch last night. I know Jeff Hendrick probably didn't have the best game he's ever had in an Irish jersey, but is that maybe relative lack of strength and depth in that position a concern going forward, David?
Well, I played midfield, but there was always a concern over midfield. Like going back all the way back to 2012, kind of, that Euros. Obviously, Glenn and Keith, like people had question marks over them, even though the two of them were very good players. And then coming onwards in the teams I played, and people always had concerns over, midfield. Obviously, we were very fortunate to have a player like Roy. And if you go back further, kind of your Andy Townsends, Matt Hollands, those players, they were very good players. But it's always been a question mark area for Ireland, that we haven't had the players in midfield to kind of, truly dominate a game. Obviously, Josh has come in. His playing style is suited Stephen and the way he wants to go. But it's just, Jeff has been a bit of a scapegoat since, since 2017, that everyone seems to kind of pile on him. Okay, yeah, it wasn't his greatest performance for Ireland, but at least he doesn't, shirk the challenge of trying to get on the ball, trying to make stuff happen. He gets into the final third. He's trying to play passes, albeit some of them don't come off, but he's one of the ones that is trying to drive us forward and try and play the ball into key areas. Now, on the flip side of that, is Stephen giving him the license to go and be the one that's going to try and create? I'd like to think so, because he does play a lot of games for him.
Is Robbie Brady a potential midfielder in the future? Oh, there we go. We've just lost David there. Conor Joyce says, it's outrageous that 2 years in people are still afraid to criticise Kenny. Why is he any different to other Irish managers and much more successful ones? I mean, I don't see a world where people are afraid to criticise Stephen Kenny. We're talking about trying to put some context on what's going on.
I enjoyed one of the comments there from MJW. Per young lad Shane, thanks for calling me young, by the way. Per young lad Shane wants to call for Kenny's head, but has to toe the line with the OTB pro Kenny at all costs as they dig harder and harder. They never get anyone on that disagrees with their opinion. I don't have to toe any line. I said at the outset, I am confused. I like what Kenny's doing with this team, and yet I can recognise that for periods last night it was atrocious. So I think a lot of Irish fans are confused this morning. I'm just one of them.
Yeah, I think that was generally the consensus coming out. What happened last night? How do you explain it? And even Nathan was talking to the players afterwards, David, and they couldn't quite explain what happened. Have you been in games like that where everything is cruising and the opposition don't appear to be trying to score, and all of a sudden 3 minutes later you're like in danger of going out of the competition if it's a cup game or losing the match? Like how does it happen that a team is so dominant? We dominated possession. I think we had 19 shots and they had 4 and 2 goals out of them. Like the stats are all heavily suggesting that it was a dominant performance from Ireland. I haven't seen the XG. I wouldn't mind seeing it.
I think it was 1.92 to like 0.2 something maybe.
Right. No, it couldn't have been 1.92. What you say? XG. So we scored 3 goals. So XG would have to be higher, wouldn't it?
What is it?
No, I think sometimes you can outperform your XG.
XG is a load of nonsense. If you look at like chances, I've never been a fan of XG. But what were you asking there?
Have you ever been in a game like that, or what happened? Like,
Yeah.
can you? So what? 2 things really. In the change room, what happens afterwards? Who's saying what to who?
There's one game that sticks out in my mind. We played Bristol with Hull in the championship a few years ago. I think we were like 1-0 down, went 2-1 up with about, I'm going to say 4 minutes to go, ended up losing 3-2. And it was all sorts of words were exchanged in the change room. Somebody got studded in the chest. There was all sorts of fighting, and yeah, look, it happens. Fellas were trying to hold one another accountable for what had happened. But it's just momentum. Like in football, like it almost felt watching that game last night. Like I was looking at it kind of going, those were one of those games you'd love to play in, where you're completely dominant. You have all the possession. You're getting down the flanks. You're getting down the wings. You're creating chances. Like players almost got ahead of themselves getting forward, and we just left ourselves completely exposed and open. That, so many bodies, like for the first goal, our midfield kind of vacates. Like they all get forward, and then in the transition, the recovery runs too slow. They don't get back quick enough. When you get punished, like albeit yes, they are 92nd in the world, but they're not the worst players ever. You know what I mean? They can still put, they can string a lot of passes together, and as you've seen from the second goal, boys can finish, and that can happen. Certainly at that level, you just felt that the one thing for me was after the first goal went in, it was like, you've got to tighten up for 5 minutes, get the momentum back, just dominate possession, just be on the front foot. And we kind of just backed off. And look, I don't need to hang Conor out to dry. Obviously, it was a poor square pass, gets intercepted, and it's, like I said, it's a tidy finish. But then it was even at 2-2. They had another chance to just flash past the post, and you're thinking, oh my God, could this be this night? But eventually, look, they got the job done. It's a results business. So. And
Conor's one of the more experienced players, and he's one of the leaders in that team as well, David. And like that was one of the moments. I think it was Tony O'Donoghue chatting to Stephen afterwards, and I noticed a flicker in Stephen's eyes when he was asked a question about leadership at 2-0 up. And he referenced Conor Horan, and I think Stephen then name checked John Egan. He said, look, we have leaders in the team, look at John Egan. He almost seemed a little bit agitated to be asked the question about leadership. But is that not a fair criticism, Stephen, that sometimes, or David, like at 2-0 up, you need your big players, your leaders, your top players to step up and see a game out like that against the 92nd best team in the world.
But it's not just about your leaders or your top players. Like, these are all professional players that have played football. They know themselves that you're 2-0 up in a game with 20 minutes to go. You see that through. You cannot. Okay, look, a goal can come. You can concede a goal.
The line is gone again. It did obviously happen to Germany the night before. Somebody had good context there about the group that we're going to be in, and the teams were in B and C. Some perspective. David Scanlon says Northern Ireland and Slovakia, pardon me, stuck in League C. England, Wales relegated to B, Sweden relegated to C. We're not in a good place, but things could be a lot worse.
Yeah, it's fair. And you see the results in Northern Ireland last night, getting beaten out the gate basically by Greece, and the struggles they're under with Barrett Clough. Things could be a lot worse.
Kenny FM is rattled. Who'll be the first to jump ship, asks Owen O'Connor.
Yeah, just waiting for someone to come on. But why would anyone, like, there are no, and even the people who are anti-Kenny, there are no replacements at the minute.
Give us your alternatives. Put out the alternative viewpoint in a different world. Do we go back to Martin O'Neill? Does Roy Keane come in and take this job? What are the list of candidates of available managers who are interested in the Ireland job? Now, here's the thing, right? It's a much better job to get next than it was when Kenny took over.
Exactly.
Because there's a bunch of 20, 21, 22, 23-year-olds who have 15 to 20 caps, which is quite an exciting period. You just need a sprinkling then of a couple more players to come through, and away you go.
I see the argument made in comments all the time that, oh, Jesus, if this was Martin O'Neill or Mick McCarthy getting the results Stephen Kenny's getting, they'd be completely criticised. But I don't get that. I don't accept that. That, like, Stephen Kenny, we know, but he won the game last night.
Record-breaking points haul in the Nations League. David Meyler's back. David, good morning. Good morning to you again.
Sorry, lads. Skype. I don't like Skype. But I'm sorry, I'm laughing at you record-breaking the Nations League.
It's like, we haven't really taken the Nations League seriously as a nation up to this point, and then everyone's like, actually, maybe we should take this seriously because there's a potential for a playoff. And then Stephen Kenny said, oh, we're going to win the group, which, in retrospect wasn't great. Can I ask you, we were having this conversation since the start, how important are his press conferences and his interviews for the players, right? Because we in the media and the fans talk about them non-stop, and there's, it's been a mixed bag, bit of a hostage to fortune, saying, oh, we can win this group. But what do the players? Does it matter to the players what he says? Are they watching that for clues and signals, or do they talk about it? What's your instinct? In the past, what would have been the case?
I would have never read too much into a manager's press conference, or certainly after a draw or something. Of course, once the draw is made, you're thinking, how can we progress? You're looking at. I initially came on. I remember at the start once I was on off the ball, and we drawn this group with Scotland and Ukraine. I looked at it and kind of gone, that's a difficult group. There's not a lot between us and Scotland. Obviously, Ukraine had a good Euros. Obviously, albeit there's a lot going on in their country, but still, I didn't think it was going to be easy, which has not been. But as a player, you always feel, you're looking at the games, can we beat Scotland? Yes, we can. Can we beat Ukraine? Yes, we can. Like, I never looked a lot into it. Kind of, you'd be more focused, regardless, unless the manager was talking about you individually, you might then hear it. You'd be kind of curious to know what he said about you. But the lads will know coming into any camp, when it was the first one, they've got to go, and you're expected to beat Armenia home and away. You're expected to get a result against Scotland at home. You might have to then, come to a draw away from home against Ukraine and Scotland. But those would be the kind of expectations. If you look over it, if we win those 2 games, that's 6 points. Beat Scotland at home, that's 9 points. Ukraine, I would have looked at it as kind of a free shot home and away. Could you pick something up on that? 2 points, possibly 3 points. Then all of a sudden you're on 12 going to Scotland away, where can you then get a result? Like, the big thing was, I think, after the Armenia away defeat in Yerevan, it was almost kind of, they were always on the back foot and they were trying to make up too much ground. And then, performances end up getting, the game kind of gets away from you before you know it. You're kind of like in a position where you're drawing or you're losing. And if the results in the earlier part of the campaign had gone well, like even if you look back to 2016 when we qualified for the Euros, like we had a calamitous result against Scotland away where everybody was calling for Martin O'Neill's head, blah, blah, blah. And then we ended up going and getting a result against Germany where it just flipped the whole thing on its head. and then we had the momentum to get going. Like, that's why once the draw is done, like, I wouldn't read too much into the November internationals. I think boys who've been in and around the squad now who haven't got as much game time will probably feature in those games. It'll give them an opportunity to kind of put their case forward for a starting 11 slot. But then once the draw is done, you'll be looking at the first, the opening games. We need to get results. We need to be, Stephen's spoken about making the Aviva Fortress. Our home form is going to be crucial. And I've always felt anyway, in the time I played for Ireland and going back, we've always been able to produce a performance to get a result away from home, which we've done over the years.
Shane Keegan has corrected my XG. 3.23 to 0.25 was the correct figures. Like, a lot of possession last night.
So I was right.
You were correct.
Over 3.
You were correct, David. You were correct. Yeah. So much possession last night without real penetration, I guess. But do we have to somehow, David, learn how to play against these teams with the low block? Because, like you mentioned, the next qualifying group.
But did we not do that last night? Did we not create a lot of chances? Did we not play well? Like, I thought, like at 2-0, I thought, okay, so this is good. This is a template for the next time. Whoever the minnows in our group are, this is how we should play. We'll be very strong from set pieces. We'll get our fullbacks exceedingly wide, and we'll create space. And you'll hope that there'll be some room for a bit of magic from. It's going to be Obafemi, and I thought we had done well. I thought there was a template there,
and yet we nearly dropped points at home.
But up until the bit where we completely had a brain fart.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a template for how you approach those games.
But I guess my point is that regardless of who we get in the group in Frankfurt on Sunday week, like, I'm almost confident-ish against the first and second seeds, because they can get up for those games. It's the lesser teams in the group that we tend to, for some reason, struggle against, David.
I wouldn't say you get up for, if you're playing a Germany, Spain, Italy, France, as opposed to an Armenia, Gibraltar. I wouldn't say you get up for one game more than the other. I'm speaking on my own experience. I'd like to think that, when you're representing Ireland, whoever you're playing, you should be, fully up for the game. Like, the thing was last night, yes, we did create chances, but how many of those would you say were real, clear-cut goal-scoring opportunities? The first goal comes from the set piece.
3.2 of them.
3.25, yeah.
Like, the first one obviously is Robbie's free kick in the header. Michael's is a good forward pass. I think it's Darrell Shea who plays the ball forward. Michael gets on the half turn, drives forward. We've seen that against Scotland, strikes it from distance, which is an incredible individual goal. The second one is a set piece. Ball falls into the box. It's a scramble, gets hit off a hand. It's a penalty. Brady tucks it away. Like, if you revert back, how many other opportunities did we have that were intricate play? Like, the hardest thing when you play up against a low block is when you have like an Obafemi and Parrott, they get attracted to the ball. And if you're one of the, the Armenian centre halves, you're kind of going, well, that's fine. You push out that way. You know what I mean? I can deal with that. You're going away from goal, whereas we needed to get some added runners in behind to kind of try and, albeit there's limited space, try and stretch them, create spaces in between.
Okay, so there's a bit of work to be done on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
How's the training for your Ironman coming along?
I haven't started that. I'll tell you why. I woke up this morning, my right knee's in agony. I think I was watching the football last night.
It's coming out in sympathy with the Ireland performance, is it?
No. Look, Ger, that game last night was a nothing game. Yes, we don't want to get relegated. Of course, we want to stay in the Nations League B. But at the same time, if we'd won 3-0, would the talk be any different?
No, those who had made their mind up have made their mind up. That seems to be
exactly,
it.
And it's hard to change someone.
Yeah,
it's hard to change someone's mind.
Can I just, David, before we go, one note of positivity. Tom Mohan is a man I know reasonably well from back home, but we all know the 21s and the positivity coming through there in the 19s as well. But fill us with optimism with the future. I know you're involved in that under-17 setup as well. Like, how are the lads faring? How's the talent that is emerging?
No, obviously I've kept a close eye with Tom, because now with me being involved with the 17s, these players are moving on from the 17s. I think we've got 5 in the squad who have gone on to play obviously against Wales, Hungary. Forgotten who they played in the first one, but they've gone on and they've done terrifically well. Obviously winning their group with maximum points, which is fantastic. I'm delighted for Tom, because now he is something to look forward to. Obviously, then the flip side of that with the 21s. I watched their game in Tala. They were very unfortunate. It was kind of probably a missed opportunity for them I imagine Jim will look back on that thinking we could have gotten another goal or just kept it together and kind of got that victory going over, because it was always going to be difficult to go to Israel. But they had an incredible season, and they think that they got to a playoff, and the unfortunate way to lose on penalties was very cruel. There's a lot of optimism with these younger players coming through. Obviously, we've got our own campaign starting next month with the 17s, but we'll be looking to follow with Tom and qualify for the elite phase in March.
Well, listen, best of luck with that, David. Great to have you with us. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers, gents. Thank you.
David Meyler giving us some insight into what the players will be thinking in the aftermath of that game. Now, all this week, it's an incredible opportunity to combine sport and leisure with a visit to Los Angeles on America's West Coast. You and 2 friends could be jetting off with multi-award winning Cassidy Travel on direct flights from Dublin with Aer Lingus on the 1st of December to spend 4 nights in the 4-star hotel, the Wayfarer, in downtown LA to take in the LA Rams versus the Seattle Seahawks in the NFL. To be in the hat for this great prize, follow at Cassidy Travel on Twitter and retweet our competition post. It's all thanks to Cassidy Travel, your one-stop sports travel shop. Sports and travel, a perfect match. You can visit CassidyTravel.ie for more. This is one of the few times in my life where people have been getting in touch with me about the competition prize going, I cannot fix it for you. But if I happen to know you and you win the prize, then you have to take me with you. That's all I'll say. John Duggan, how are you?
Ger and Shane, how are we doing?
What did you make of last night?
Well, the biggest thing in my life as a sports fan has always been the Republic of Ireland soccer team. I think is the biggest thing in the country, and I'm a bit dispirited because for me as a sports fan, I want to feel that our teams are in the arena. In other words, that we're in the hunt to do something or be something or get somewhere. And the last time I really would have felt that with the Republic of Ireland team was the James McLean goal in Wales 5 years ago when we were on the road to a World Cup playoff, and obviously we know what happened then against Denmark. But I don't get the sense we're anywhere near that at the moment, and I think it could be years before we're in the arena for something. That's why the All Blacks win for the rugby team was so important this summer in my mind, because we can win a World Cup now in rugby. Unlikely that we will, but we can. Whereas there's no can at the moment with Irish football and that soccer team. What's the best we can hope for? It's really hard now almost not to qualify for the Euros. It's 1 and 2 teams, 24 teams. And our hope at the moment is that we might gallantly lose in the last 16 of a European Championship, or at a real stretch get to the last 8. And that for me is a bit dispiriting, because I was even looking on Damien Delaney last night, was on Virgin, and the social media clips were posted, and I think he made some very passionate points and legitimate points. But the reaction to him was very tribal, and it was almost like a tribalism around the manager and the style of play and this and that, whereas I think the issues in Irish football are much more structural. You had the budget coming out yesterday, and you'll have tens of millions allocated to an industry of horse racing, which is a worldwide leading industry. But that's what it takes. It takes that amount of investment. We know the FAI in the previous guys mismanaged things. That came out, obviously. And I don't know if the money is there at the moment, if the population's there, if the competitive sports are allowing the environment, especially with the Premier League now being a global league and harder to access, that we're having 6, 7, 8-year-olds playing really good technical football to allow us in 10, 15, 20 years' time to compete at the top level and to be in the arena. And I don't feel we're in that arena.
So taking the structural issues, right? When you're watching the team, is it still an emotional investment?
Well, it's the biggest thing. It's the biggest thing in my life has always been the Republic of Ireland soccer team growing up. And even say back to 2016, people are going, oh, we haven't had a team in years. 2016, we rattled the French on home soil, who would end up being the next World Cup winners. So that was only 6 years ago that we did that. And I have a huge emotional investment in the team. I thought the game against Scotland in the summer was great, but there are things we just need to fix. I think in the micro sense, which is like for Stephen Kenny's team, beating weaker teams comfortably. Armenia were thumped 5-0 by Ukraine at the weekend. They're 92nd in the world. So there's these...
I get that point, but Nathan made the point earlier that he was doing his research, and the time that they were last here, which is obviously a big night in Armenian football history, and they got ridden by the referee, in their own words, that stage. We had that 2012 team, which had Duffer and Richard Dunn and Shay Given in it, and we were 2-0 up. They had their, was it the goalkeeper was sent off?
2011, yeah.
2011, the goalkeeper was sent off, and they put us under the cosh with 10 men by scoring, and then we were like frantically defending at the end in controversial circumstances. So, like, while Ukraine beat them 5-0, I get that. Historically, we're where we are versus those not great teams.
At home, we should be beating Luxembourg and Azerbaijan and Armenia much more comfortably than we have been.
But when you talk about an arena, John, like this Irish team, if we qualify for a major tournament, great. If we get to a last 16, brilliant. And if we get to a quarter final, that's exceptional. That's where we are as a country. That's where we always have been.
It's not where we always have been.
Well, that's the furthest we've ever got, Italian 90. We celebrate that like a massive moment in this country's history.
Yeah, because it's the world. You know, we're nowhere near being in the last 8 in the world. We're nowhere near qualifying for World Cup at the moment.
Do you think we're
nowhere near qualifying for World Cup? 13 teams out of Europe at the moment. Obviously, he's going to expand to 48 teams for 2026 and beyond. But we're nowhere near qualifying for World Cup.
Can Stephen Kenny get us to that level where we are good enough to qualify?
Well, I don't know if Stephen Kenny has the raw materials at his disposal to do that. But I suppose the issue in the immediate term is, can Stephen Kenny's teams beat weaker teams more comfortably than they should? And like that is an issue, because
it is an issue, but it has historically been an issue.
But now, like, you know, if you look at Jack
Charlton, drew 0 Liechtenstein.
Yeah, but that was when Jack Charlton's teams were over the hill.
Well, but it still happened.
But Jack Charlton's teams in Dublin between 86 and 93 didn't lose a game until they lost to Spain. We routinely beat the Latvias, the Lithuanias, these teams in qualifying for 1994. Routinely beat them. And
did we not struggle against Cyprus? Was there not like a last minute or a late winner?
I was talking about Jack's team here.
Yeah.
So
that was Mick McCarthy's team, was it?
The O2 qualification. Well, we beat Andorra 3-1 at Lansdowne Road in that campaign.
O2 qualification, we were pretty good against the weaker.
We had Roy Keane like that.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, of course.
And I think structurally, it like
I've no issue with us going to Scotland and losing 2-1. No issue at all. Scotland are on the up. They've got a lot of Premier League players. They had a lot of tempo. They had a home crowd the night. I've no issue with that defeat. I have an issue with conceding goals outside the box against Luxembourg, against Azerbaijan last night, the chaos that we saw, the lack of composure when we're 2-1 and when we just conceded the first goal, the lack of leadership there, and the inability to break weaker teams down, because ultimately we can't qualify for these tournaments unless we beat the weaker teams, especially at home.
You said there, like, you'd expect to qualify for the Euros now, given the amount of teams to qualify. So Euro 2024, we'll expect to qualify. If we get to a last 16 and get through the group,
I wouldn't expect. I think we've got a good chance.
Good chance.
Yeah.
But if we get to a last 16, then John, is that not a good? Has Stephen Kenny not achieved the level at which we're expecting him to achieve then? Is that not, can we not celebrate, right, we got to a last 16 in Europe, great. I mean, is that not where we are, given that we've...
But that is where we are, and that's why, you know, is that in the arena in my mind? It's on the edge of it. Whereas I felt with O'Neill's team in 2016, before it all went south, because it did go south after that, because especially with the way we started those qualifiers for 2018, we were in the arena rattling the French 1-0 up at half-time in Lyon. So Stephen Kenny's football, and I've been on the show many times saying that this is the football you want to see. You don't want to see Mick McCarthy's football. You don't want to see these 1-1 draws and these set pieces, even though Egan's started to score from set pieces. You want to see progressive football, and absolutely all completely behind that. But there's just certain things that kind of make you frustrated, because it's one step forward and there's one step back at the moment.
So, notwithstanding the bigger issues, in the short term, what does Kenny need to do in the Euros qualifiers for you?
I think a lot of the positive talk needs to stop. I think, the coaches is a strange thing for me. Gone through a lot of coaches, whether Damien Duff or Anthony Barry or John Eustace. There's a lot of turnover there in the coaching structure. I'd like to see that be stable. And just try and maybe, it's difficult with raw materials. It is difficult for him. It's to try and maybe progress players like Will Smallbone, who are comfortable on the ball, who's playing at the championship, and just try and break down weaker teams, because I think there's no issue with us going away from home against better teams and producing a traditional Irish performance, as we did in Portugal, as we did in Serbia, as we did in Scotland. I just like where was Chiazode Igbene the last 2 games? He scored 5 goals in 11 games for Rotherham so far this season.
And was good off the bench as well.
He's the form player, and towards the end of the last campaign, he was the guy.
I'd be interesting.
I didn't understand it, and Kenny said at the end of his presser that he wasn't injured. So I don't understand. Parrish has been out of form. Parrott hasn't hit a barn door this season.
Well, Parrott has been playing very well, according to.
But he hasn't scored goals. Parrott's
But
there to score goals.
Well, he's not. He's not. You know, it's not just it's a multifaceted thing. He's probably going to end up being more of a provider for us rather than a goal scorer. And like, while I haven't seen him play for Preston, we have had Vinnie Perth on the show who said he's watched all his Preston stuff on Y Scout, and he's actually been playing very well, but confidence is low. And like, once he missed that chance, I wonder if Kenny kept him in the team because he's going to take him aside and say, you know, you're still brilliant. Whereas actually, Chidozie Ogbene's going to be ready to go when the qualifiers come around. I don't know. It would be very interesting to hear that. But again,
I just think it's about players who are match sharp. Matt Doherty hasn't played for Spurs this season. He was at fault for that goal in Scotland. Like, you got to have players who are match sharp, in my opinion.
Do we have the bar set too high because of nostalgia and because of what we did 30 years ago? Like, we don't have the play. We don't, as we've mentioned Roy Keane here already. We don't have any Roy Keane in this team. We don't have any top Premier League level players. There's only a couple of players between Nathan Collins and Bazunu who are playing regular Premier League football. Like, it's times have changed and football has changed, and that is 3 decades ago.
There's a huge amount of challenges. And like the fact that we don't have, apart from Collins and Bazunu, who actually had a poor game last night, we don't have players at the top level. But maybe the Championship is good enough. It's one of the best leagues in the world, like the top 6 or 7 leagues in the world. I've no issue with us not being where we could be, or compared to 30 years ago. It's just frustrating that we can't beat teams that we should be beating at home, like Luxembourg, Azerbaijan and Armenia. If we can beat those teams and put it up to the other teams that are ranked above us, then I'm happy with that.
We did win last night, though. We did win the game, like, you know. It wasn't...
But our performance in Scotland was much better.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
All right, it's 8:51. If you'd like to get involved in this, 087 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. You can leave a comment on the YouTube stream. It's time for Virtual Insanity.
You have entered Power Drive.
Right, where are we going, John?
The Sanderson Farms Championship, as you would expect, is on the PGA Tour in Mississippi from tomorrow. Unlucky last week, second with our headline tip. Rasmus Højgaard, 28-1 in the French Open, which was a painful defeat, but there you go. So the profit is 33.2% going into this week's tournament, and it starts at 12:45 Irish time tomorrow. So there are 4 golfers we're picking. If you want to get involved, obviously don't lose your shirt, only keep it €2 each way as a bit of interest. The headline tip is Heath Tagala at 18-1 for €7 each way. So Heath Tagala is a beautifully naturally talented player who was the 54-hole leader in this tournament last year. Started off the season with a tie for 6th at the Fortinet Championship, 18-1 for 7 each way. I think he's got the artistry, he's got the je ne sais quoi. He's a brilliant college golfer. He's going to be one of the stars of, I believe, of the next few years on the PGA Tour. So Heath Tagala is the headline tip at 18-1 to break his duck this week. The second tip is Denny McCarthy, the guy with the Irish name, one of the most improved players in golf. You have Bermuda greens this week. In Mississippi at Jackson Country Club, and he's the best putter in America on Bermuda greens. He was 1 shot off the lead in the 54-hole stage in this tournament last year. He's been 4 times in the top 20 in the last 4 starts in this tournament, twice in the top 10. Denny McCarthy was 100 in the rankings the season before last, was 37th last season. Really improved player, Denny McCarthy. You got taste at 25-1 for 5 each way to get it done. Our third selection is Ben Ann at 66-1, third in this 3 years ago in this tournament, and lost his form but came back out of the Corn Ferry Tour, and on his first start this year was tied for 4th at the Fortinet Championship. So Ben Ann has regained his form, has course form, is 66-1 for 2 each way. The final player is Hayden Buckley, 125-1 for 2 each way from neighbouring Tennessee. Hayden Buckley was tied for 4th in this tournament last year, so he likes the course. Missed the cut in his first start, but he was the best player off the tee in Silverado. And if the putts can drop on a different putting surface this week, Hayden Buckley, who played so well at the US Open and was a rookie last year, could surprise a few. So Hayden Buckley, 125-1 for 2 each way. Ben Ann, 66-1 for 2 each way. We have also Denny McCarthy, 5 each way at 25s, and the headline tip, 7 each way. So Heath Tagala at 18-1 in the Sanderson Farms Championship. It starts tomorrow. We have to just wish ourselves the best of luck.
Virtual Insanity on fire at the moment with John Duggan. That's this week's episode.
You have entered Power Drive.
More from John, of course, on Saturday afternoon and Off the Ball on News Talk. John, thanks very much for that. A reminder, OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish today. Here's what's on OTB Sports Radio. Chris Waddle is OTB Gold at 1 o'clock. Koi Gig is live from 3. Our retro panel is The Sporting Mindset at 4. And OTB Gold is Paul McGrath at 6. And the show is live tonight with Joe. Eric Donovan's going to be in studio after his victory on Saturday night on TG Carr. I met him at the Aviva last night. He looks pretty broken up, but he is absolutely delighted with life, and so he should be, having finally got the redemption, the end to the redemption arc that he wanted, and he's really looking forward to tonight. So make sure you tune in for that. It's going to be great. Kenny Cunningham's going to be on hand to reflect on last night, and Matt Williams will be on for Wednesday Night Rugby as well. Follow OTB across our social channels and subscribe to the OTB Podcast Network for all the best in our latest sports content. We're back after these. The legendary Irish sports broadcaster Timmy McCarthy is going to tell us why you had to be there. First, here's Nathan and Joe at the Aviva last night alongside Gavin Cummesky talking before the match about the stadium atmosphere, or lack thereof.
We do crack jokes about this every time we're here, and it's not a priority, like let's sort out the dead and let's sort out the football. But when we've done with that, we do really need to talk about what is the atmosphere they're trying to create here right now. Like, why are we blasting fans with this?
The music. Painful. So I've been to this football gig. You travel all over the world, all over Europe, and you don't get this anywhere. It's painful.
Well, we were in Hampden Park on Saturday night. One of the best atmospheres I've experienced at a football match. From half an hour beforehand, the place was packed. They were playing a little bit of music, but they were all proper football anthems that almost the Scottish and Irish fans were singing together.
People knew what was coming as well. They knew what songs were coming, so they were coming into their seats to be there for those songs.
And we're doing the Manchester Derby next Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
We will do an hour pre-build-up without any of this sort of thing in the background.
Look behind us. Nobody is talking to each other because it's too loud. It's like a bad nightclub.
It's a basic thing. I know
I can't
people
believe I'm in a bad nightclub with Nathan Murphy
the media
and Gavin
moaning,
Cummesky.
but I honestly do believe people are staying out of the stadium, as you said, as long as they possibly can, because it's just too bloody loud.
Yeah. They have to have seen in fairness to the FAI at the moment, they seem to be learning lessons, and they were just in Hampden Park. Hopefully they'll scribble it down, and by the time Halland comes, we don't scare him off with this kind of these tunes. Shocking 80s dance music.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB Sports Rugby.
Luke Fitzgerald's been banging on about Frawley for years about how he should be playing 10 and he's wasted at 12, and you look at him and physically he's very robust. He looks like the closest thing there is to Johnny Sexton physically.
Subscribe to the rugby stream on the OTB Sports app now.
In a van, that wouldn't sound good, but this does. Get up to 75% off van insurance. Now available in FBD branches nationwide. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. 75% no claims discount based on 5 years claims free. Available on new van policies used for farm or business purposes. Terms and conditions apply. Underwritten by FBD Insurance plc. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM
with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
It's so unexpected.
It's one of those you had to be there moments.
You had to be there.
It subsequently genuinely did change everything about my life.
You had to be there.
Right. I'm delighted to say Timmy McCarthy is the latest in our You Had to Be There series. Timmy, good morning to you. How are you?
Great. George, great to be here. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's great to have you in studio. Welcome back.
Yeah, it's a long time. It's been pre-COVID, so it's a long time. So nice to be back. Nice to be back in person.
Your list starts in 72 and finishes in 2008. So let's go sequentially here. The 1972 Cup final. This is the FAI Cup final.
So I was a Cork Hibs fan, and my father used to take me every Sunday to Flower Lodge. And when you look at League of Ireland today, back then there was 25,000 people at every game in Cork at that point in time, and from sort of 68 to 74 Hibs were probably the best team in the country, along with Cork Celtic who had Sports and Shamrock Rovers. But there was clubs like Drumcondra and Shells. So every 2 weeks we go to Flower Lodge. Then the following Sunday we go to Turner's Cross to watch Celtic lose. That was the sort of thing. And Hibs then brought in players like Dave Wigginton and Tony Marsden and players like from England, John Lawson, Sonny Sweeney from Scotland. So they brought a really great array of talent. And they had a couple of local stars, and Maya Dennehy was one of the local stars. And the background to my recollection, my memory is that the week before Hibs played Waterford in Flower Lodge in front of 25,000 people. And if they won the game, they would have won the league. And it would have been the first time, it was a big thing. They'd won the league the year before in a playoff against Shamrock Rovers. So to retain it would have been a big thing for them. And they were 2 up with 12 minutes to go, and Waterford were down to 9 men because 12 men in the field.
Where
2 guys got injured. Okay, reminiscence of last night. And Waterford got 3 goals in the last 12 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And I remember my father being devastated. We used to get there an hour and a half before the game because there was a rock on the terrace where he would stand me inside the rock so I could see over people with a milk crate in that sense. And he was devastated. And, I was 10 or 11 years of age, so I was upset, but I wasn't as devastated as he was. He was really upset. So the following week was Dalymount Park. My first time ever been at a soccer match in Dublin.
How did you get up?
By train.
Right.
And it was really scary. It was a really scary experience.
Big city.
Big city. You're coming in. We got off the train at Euston Station, and I remember my father would have a couple of drinks, and I'd get a bottle of Fanta and a packet of crisps was my sort of treat for the time. Then we'd walk up. We walked up the North Circular Road and into Phibsborough, and it was packed. The place was absolutely packed with fans from both sides, but particularly and our perception. Well, my perception as a child of Dublin at the time was very tough. It was a really tough place. So now you're an 11-year-old in Dalymount Park, and I'd have seen on TV with international matches, so it was just a huge experience.
Yeah.
And obviously Waterford were league champions, so you're coming in with not with the same confidence you had probably the week before in that sense. And Hibs wore a white jersey, green shorts, and green socks. And my favourite player was Wigginton, David Wigginton, and he came from England, blonde, speedy guy, scored for fun. But that day Maya was the star, and he got the first ever hat-trick in FAI history. The only other hat-trick I was a memory of was Jeff Hurst in the World Cup, so this was really unique at any point in time. And I can remember the game where Waterford were sort of in control of the game. They were obviously buoyed by the week before and the performance of the week before, but Hibs were a really good football team. Dave, because he had come in from England and taken over as player manager, and he went on into Home Farm afterwards, but Cork played really well on the day, and but the 3 goals were sloppy goals. Like they were really sort of
strikers finishes.
And always his right foot, And
right.
now Maya Denny lived 1 block away from me. If you take 1 street away from me, the church field separated us, so he was an idol to guys like me, in a sense. And Jerry Finnegan was another local player who played on the team, so they both lived within 500 yards of me. So to see him on such a big stage and scoring 3 goals was phenomenal. I mean, it was just phenomenal on the day.
Do you think that stuff like this is a bit lost to the ether in Irish football history because Hibernians don't exist anymore in the same way? Like if that had been a Shamrock Rovers player scoring a hat-trick in 72 or a Bows player scoring a hat-trick, the first ever hat-trick, we'd hear about it a lot. Like it's one of the things that maybe Irish football has, like, well, that club doesn't exist, so nobody can claim credit for it, or nobody can kind of lean into the nostalgia for it. Am I wrong about that?
No, I think you're right. I believe that. I mean, Hibs had a great era. I say 68 to 74. They won the league. They won 2 cups. They retained it the following year. They won a Blacksnake Cup, which was a big competition, which was an All-Ireland competition at the time.
Right.
It went on for 7 years. Only 2 Southern winners in the 7 years, And Hibs went out of business in 75. And like that, the memories of those great times were just washed away. It just seemed to be a case that, you're no longer relevant.
Yeah.
I mean, Maya Denny, when you look at that team, Tony Marsden, Wiggy, Sonny Sweeney, Johnny Lawson, John Herrick, Noel O'Mahony, Martin Sheehan, Joe Grady on goal. I mean, a legendary team, played in European Cups when you had to be champions to play in European Cups and Cup Winners' Cup. Like I see on YouTube, a snippet of Maya Denny getting this hat-trick in grainy black and white, with Jimmy McGee, God rest his soul, as the commentator. But because Hibs are gone, we've lost, as you said, if this was particularly maybe a Dublin club, it might have stayed longer in that sense, but it shouldn't be lost. I mean, he went on to play for Ireland afterwards, and I think he had 11 caps and scored a couple of goals. But definitely is a tragedy.
Yeah, nothing to be sniffed at all. Okay, so that's your first one. Maya Denny, hat-trick for Cork Hibs in the 1972 FAI Cup final. Do you remember much about Dalymount on the day?
I do, and my son played later on with Bows for a period of time, and Dalymount hadn't changed to 40 years on. It's actually scary in that sense. But what I remember about it was, it's the size of it. I mean, Flower Lodge was big at the time, I said 25,000 people, but Dalymount, looked bigger, felt bigger. The fact it was inside in Phibsborough, right in the centre of a kind of a centre, made it more expansive, and it reminded me more of English grounds as I went to English grounds later on in my life than we say Flower Lodge, which was out in Ballintemple, which is now Páirc Uí Rinn, sort of away from the hub of the city. So
I think I asked this of Rory O'Connor when his episode of You Had to Be There was on, but like that experience of going to a match with your dad as a kid, getting up at the train and experiencing that with your dad, like that must be quite special to think back on as well, because it's a part of your upbringing, going to matches with your dad. It's nearly just a stepping stone in childhood.
It's an amazing memory for me, and just, as I said, every Sunday we went to games. Every Sunday we went to games. Cork Hibs was our team, Cork Celtic and Turner's Cross, and he grew my love for soccer. I mean, I love soccer. I really love soccer. So he grew my love for soccer, and he was a very proud Corkman. Obviously, he loved GA and other sports. He never saw me play basketball, which is actually ironic, and you consider that was my main career ultimately later on. But to have my father, introduced me to sport, introduced me to the passion of sport, introduced me to the price you have to pay to be a fan of sport, and he took me to other places, as well.
Do you mean the emotional toll of being a fan?
Yeah, the emotional toll of being a fan, that it doesn't all go well.
It doesn't all go well.
It does, because it is. And I can remember many years later when my son played League of Ireland, he played for Athlone against Dundalk in a big game for Dundalk. And I had the pleasure of bringing my father to that game. And my son scored his first ever League of Ireland goal. And it was just a full cycle coming around that, he had brought me to the game, and now I was showing him my son at a later stage. So, yeah, very special for my late father,
So, you're talking, our next one is, we're spooling forward 13 years, and Jasper McElroy breaking the Irish basketball scoring record.
Well, this is very personal to me because he was my teammate, okay? And McElroy came into Ireland in '83. From Chicago, was one of the top 10 scorers in Division 1 college. So he was a phenomenal player, and just wasn't drafted in the NBA because he was in between sizes. He was about 6'5", and but he was a scoring machine. And in Ireland, he could play as a power forward inside, but in the NBA, you had to be 6'8", 6'9", back at that point in time. Yeah. So he kind of got lost in the journey. The other thing was interesting is how we got him was, compared to today, the world is a global game for the American college players today. Back then it wasn't. China wasn't open to them. Eastern Europe wasn't open to them. Russia wasn't open. South America. So if they didn't make it in the NBA, they looked to go to Europe. And that's how we ended up getting some players who were probably, way above the standard that, we were delivering at a point in time. So he came in '83. We won the league in our first year in '83. Phenomenal scorer. I mean, would score for fun, and '85 came then, and we played which is considered the most infamous cup final of all time, where we lost to Neptune in very controversial circumstances, and he was our main player on the team. We had two Americans at the time, and then we played him. We played Killarney.
Can we stop there for a second? Tell us about the controversial circumstances. Everybody at home is going, what happened? So what happened?
What happened was we led the entire game. And I'm not bitter about this now, 40 years on.
I was going to say, bring it out. You're allowed to be bitter. I think you should be bitter about stuff like this, because what's the point of being involved in the first place?
It really hurts me because, on the day we were the better team, RT were televising it to record, showing it and record it a few weeks later. So with 2 minutes 32 seconds to go, we're winning by 7 points. And Neptune's Tom Sullivan shoots a 3-point attempt, misses. Ray Smith gets the rebound and puts it in the basket for 2 points. So the score was 89-84. And it went up on the board 89-85. And I was running up the court and I said to the coach, the score is wrong. The score is wrong. Over the next 2 minutes, we had a number of chances. Our American got fouled, not Jasper now, because he was a scoring machine. Dale Roberts, 6'11" centre. Not a great scorer, but a great rebounder. He got fouled 4 times in the next 2 minutes. He got 4 1-on-1s and missed the 4 of them. So it never changed the score for us. We got a basket. But with 29 seconds to go, it was 91 points each on the scoreboard. And we called a timeout. And I said to the coach, the score is wrong. We are a point ahead. And our tactic was then basically, we had 30 seconds to keep the ball in that era. So we could have kept the ball if we were a point ahead. They would, but because we were 91 all, we had to go for a score. okay, and we turned over the ball basically with 3 seconds to go, and they got a fast break and scored. 93-91, the place erupted. It was the first time they had ever beaten us, Neptune, in their own court, which was a brilliant thing for the game, I suppose, if you take it, the sort of wider view of it. We were shocked that we lost, first of all, because we shouldn't have lost, and then shocked over the situation. And then within 15 seconds, the score changed to 92-91. Sorry, we made a mistake. And we just never accepted our trophies, and we just feel that was just, it was just wrong. It was a bit reminded me of the 72 USSR Olympic USA men's Olympic final, 51-50. The Americans were winning, and the Russians took out the ball in 3 seconds to go, lost the ball. Commissioner said, play it again, lost the ball again, and the commissioner played again. Then they scored. The commissioner said, 52-51, game over, USSR wins. So that's my sad memory of the 85 Cup final.
That Neptune Demons rivalry, like for anyone who followed basketball back then would be familiar with it, but like you all would have known each other quite well, and yet it was still a fairly fiery rivalry, I would imagine.
It was, I described it once like a civil war. We live within half a mile of each other, all the players. I mean, it was actually, and they were so we were the dominant team, and then they came in, so they were the upstarts coming in, and it's hard to know what would have happened if they hadn't won that game. I mean, history shows they won the game, but if they hadn't won it, because 3 weeks later, on the Friday night, we played them in the league decider, and Terry Strickland tipped the ball in on the buzzer to beat us by a point. And the next day, they showed the cup final on TV. So it wasn't a really good weekend in my house now. But I had no issue with that league decider. I mean, it was legit. He made a shot, and and then a few weeks later, they were going for the treble then, and we beat them in the championship final. Was a big thing for us. But in between those games, McElroy, we played Killarney, and Killarney would have been the first team to bring in Americans. They would, they started this whole American entry into Ireland, and we beat them 115-95. Dale Roberts and myself got, I think, 17 points each, and Jasper Macker scored 70 points.
Wow!
Which was, to be with him was just like a out-of-world experience, Like I think I scored 70 points, Dale scored 70 points. We felt that we had really contributed really well, and this guy, scored, it's like 5 times what we had scored, and he just, he didn't miss a shot. It was just like he was in this different world. Now they had 2 Americans, and and they were like ranked 3 or 4 in the table at that stage. So it was the top of the table clash, and he just started, and I had a great relationship on the court with him and off the court, but on the court I had a great relationship and understanding with him. And I can remember the very first ball I gave him, and he got it and spun and swerved and just dropped in this little 10-foot baby shot. I said to myself, nothing but net here, this is serious. And he just went to a different level. And I sat back that night when I went home, and I said, this guy's good enough to be in the NBA. This guy was good enough to be in the NBA, and circumstances, just as I said earlier, prevented him. But to be part of an environment as a player where somebody steps way beyond the crowd now. I mean, way beyond the crowd. I mean, I was in Hampden Park when Zidane got his wonder goal, okay? Yeah. I was in Lanzarote when Roy Keane helped us against Holland and led the team against Holland, and I thought they were incredible performances. But to be part of an environment as a teammate of somebody who gets to just world-class level on one particular night is a very special memory.
The hair literally stands over the back of your neck. That's it's a cliche because it's true. You can feel it going, well, this is something special.
There's even clicked up a piece from Ger and Shane here from 10 years ago in the Examiner, and he was saying the only twice in national competition did Jasper McElroy fail to score fewer than 39 points against Neptune. So it was obviously a team he liked playing against. There was consistency as well with him.
And what he was a scorer, okay? I mean, that's but they used to put a guy man marking him, so they'd have a guy, Joe Healy actually, who would just ignore the game and just really trying to annoy McElroy, and he'd still get 40 points a game in that sense. I think Kieran wrote in his book Hanging from the Rafters that I averaged, I think, 20 odd points against Neptune in my career, but it was irrelevant compared to McElroy.
I know, that's not bad.
But you kind of come home and feel, I've really played well, and this guy is getting 40 points or 50 points. He was just brilliant.
Did you play with all the Neptune lads for Ireland then?
Yes.
Yeah. So you knock lumps off each other and then like kind of eyeball each other for the first training session and then become teammates? Or was it straight away?
It was straight away. It was straight away in that sense. No, I can't say with every single player because obviously there's individual rivalries in that sense. But I would say with 95% of them, there's
always one.
There's always, and they might feel the same about me or about some of my teammates in that sense. Like Tom Wilkinson, who played with me with Demons and then went to Neptune. He was originally from Neptune and went back to them. Like we were roommates. So and then Tom Sullivan and those guys were, But it was different though, because when you do come in for the first day, now I was captain for most of my career, just so you have to kind of put your pride in your back pocket, and you're now part of the Irish team. So so if they beat you the night before or you beat them, it doesn't matter. But no, it was instant in that sense. It was great times.
Billy Bowie has been in touch to say, I was at both Waterford games. The first was crazy. 3 goals in the last 10 minutes by 10 men. Timmy mentioned Gerry Finnegan. What a player. Went to Shells afterwards. One of the first Cork players ever signed by a Dublin club.
Gerry Finnegan was a midfielder, small, stout guy. You'd look at him, great passer of football. And again, when you look at the League of Ireland, look at soccer today, they were phenomenal players. Like Gerry Finnegan held his own against Lawson and Sweeney, who were brought in from England and Scotland as full-time professionals. He was a coal man. So Gerry Finnegan would deliver coal. There's no coalman anymore, I don't think, but he used to come around with his coal van, get a bag of coal over his shoulder with a shawl over his head to keep his hair and his neck as clean as possible, come into our house, dump the coal in, and I'm looking at this guy in awe, and because last Sunday I saw him perform for Cork Hibs, and he went to Dublin afterwards. Great player.
Ronan O'Gara, Heineken Cup semi-final 2006. What stand out about this for you? It's the Leinster performance.
Yeah, well, it's the background to the game. He was coming to this game under enormous pressure. He was coming to the game because in a Celtic League game previously, Contoponi from Leinster had really ruled the roost, and he was coming into this game, and Munster were coming to this game where Leinster were starting to become relevant in the sense of Heineken Cups. They were starting to sort of...
Leinster beat Toulouse in the quarterfinals, and Toulouse were the powerhouse, and Leinster had done it with stunning rugby, where there was one try they scored from behind their own goal line where Hickey runs like Linford Christie was the commentary, and it was sensational. And Toulouse were supposed to beat them, they were mad favourites, but suddenly this was a coming out party for Leinster, and finally Leinster were going to ascend to the throne that they had self-appointed themselves for 5 or 10 years, but Munster were waiting, lying, thinking.
And Leinster were favourites, so it was the first time, because Munster previous to that had always been favourites, in those games up to that point in time. And so Munster were coming in under pressure, and Agar was coming in under real pressure. As Contoponi had, sort of done a number on him in the Celtic League. And many players spoke about it afterwards in different books. Alan English book about The Road to Glory talked about, many players said that Agar was under pressure. Munster kicked off, Leinster, Matt O'Kelly, I think, dropped the ball, Gara kicked the penalty, and all of a sudden, I remember being at the game, and you just felt like we're going to win this game, like this is going to be a win today. And he was phenomenal, not just in his kicking. He missed one kick just before half time, but in his control, in his passing, in his leadership. That was the day I saw O'Gara as a real leader, because that people were talking about David Wallace and Paul O'Connell and guys like that, but O'Gara really took control of the game, not just by his own performance, but he kept guys going. He kept guys going who were struggling. Dennis Hickey, you talk about the Linford Christie sprint against Toulouse, made another sprint in the game, and O'Gara was back helping, which people never gave him credit for his tackling and stuff, but he was. Then he obviously, first half Munster were dominant. Then in the second half, Leinster took over the game, and Contoponi missed ridiculous penalties. It was, like the three of us would have had better attempts. It was really awful, some of the kicking that he had on that day. And, but they were hanging in. They had closed the gap to 16-6, I think. They had missed 3 or 4 penalties, so they were sort of in the game. And then O'Gara gets the try with 8 or 9 minutes to go, and ran probably faster and farther than he's probably ever ran in his career at that point or since. Jumped to hoarding, which was actually amazing, and kind of really gave it to everybody. And I just thought that moment showed how much it really meant. I just remember as a player, Ger, when the pressure's really on and you're expected to deliver, and you deliver. The outbreak, bursting of feeling and emotions are enormous, and that's what happened to O'Gara at that point in time.
Yeah, and I think it's the becoming of that Munster team where they go from being a nearly team to legends, like days like that. Am I right? This is the Croke Park game, isn't it?
Lansdowne Road.
It is Lansdowne. Okay, the Croke Park was the
reverse. You know,
but it was the fact that it was the old Lansdowne Road as well. That almost added. There's nothing wrong with the new Lansdowne Road atmosphere, but back in the old Lansdowne Road there was something different to me, wasn't there, in terms of atmosphere? Like, it was just special, and
it was tight. And
tight and retro even, but like in its own way.
Yeah, it was. You felt you were on top of the pitch. You know, you felt you were like in with the players in that sense. It was obviously retro, and Munster at that point in time, you know, as you said, Ger, were the nearly men. They'd lost 2 Heineken Cups, and you know, and this really was. They went on to beat Biarritz, but if they hadn't got over Leinster would have started to become dominant earlier. I mean, they became dominant a couple of years later. So Munster may never have got the 2 titles that they got over that year and 2 years later if they hadn't. And O'Gara was really the catalyst. You know, it was the one game I would say, you know, he had many great games. I mean, he kicked drop goals, you know, to win on like Grand Slams. But on that day, his performance was a complete performance from start to finish when he was really under pressure.
Yeah, it was totally sickening as a Leinster fan. So you know it's great when it's like, yeah, that one sticks in the craw. Right, so on to the golf and the Ryder Cup in the same year, 2006. This is Darren Clarke's Ryder Cup.
So I was an on-course commentator at the Ryder Cup for RT, and it's probably one of the highlights of my commentating career. And on the Friday, I got Woods and Furyk and Gossie and Donald in the afternoon, the foursomes, and Woods and Furyk lost 2-1. So I was on the tee box in the morning when Clarke walked on, and you know, obviously his wife had passed away just a number of weeks previously. There was a lot of debate about, you know, he hadn't played for a while before the Ryder Cup. When he was picked, there was a lot of question marks about would he be able to stand up to the pressure, the emotional pressure, would his game stand up? You know, so there was a lot of question marks about him coming into the Ryder Cup at that point in time. And when he walked onto the first tee, because obviously as an on-course commentator you're inside the ropes, so you have a different perception of the atmosphere. It was just phenomenal. I mean, it was you know, a hairs the back of your head moment, like, or back of your neck raised. Like, it was just a moment in time where everything focused on Darren Clarke, and then he went on obviously to hit a great tee shot, and they won that game. But I was commentating the next day in their match, in their 4-ball match against Woods and Furyk, and it was a big match because for Clarke, I thought, because the day before was emotion and hype, and they got through it. Now it's just bread and butter. Now can you deliver? You know, you haven't played for a number of months, okay? Can you really stand up to the pressure now? Woods and Furyk had lost the day before, so you know, they wanted to respond in that sense, and the Americans were getting a bit of a trouncing at that point in time, and his golf was exceptional. I mean, you know, Dennis O'Sullivan, the senior pro, a European Tour pro, was with me on the co-commentary as we followed him. He got a birdie in 4 and 5 from nowhere, and you know, they went 3 up early on, then they went 4 up on the 14th. Furyk got a great win for the Americans on the 15th, so we crossed the road to the 16th. And I said to Dennis as we were walking along the fairway, I said, it'd be great if we got across the road, because it didn't look like it at one stage. So we crossed the road to 16th, the par 5 with the Liffey, splitting it, and the green on the left hand side. Clarke had an okay drive, okay, and then he laid up but he laid up into the rough on the right hand side, and it was torrential. The rain came from nowhere now in that sense. Westwood went into the water, so he was out of it, okay, and Woods hit a great shot, okay, to kind of give them a real chance for birdie. And so you're walking up, and there's a grandstand on the left hand side, on the right hand side of the fairway, facing directly the green, and the emotion in the rain was just exceptional. And you're kind of saying, you know, can he deliver now? Can Clarke actually get over the line now in that sense? Because he had levelled off a bit, I felt, as the game went on that day. And he chipped in on the 16th. And, you know, I was watching a thing recently, and there I am with Dennis O'Sullivan in the background as he's hugging Tiger Woods, and Timmy McCarthy and Dennis O'Sullivan in the back of the photograph at the back of it in that sense. But just, it was, even though Friday was the emotional day for him, the fact that he had the talent, okay, because there were a lot of question marks about Clarke's ability to deliver back then, because he won a major later on, but back then he had a lot of chances.
Unfulfilled at that stage.
Unfulfilled. Yeah. And he really delivered, you know, particularly on the day that I commented on him. He really delivered. When the chips were down, early on in the game and late in the game, he stood out. And I just thought to myself that day, this guy's a serious golfer, and a major is inevitable at some point for him.
Did you meet Michael Jordan at the K Club that week?
That was the very first ever interview I ever did live.
Right.
Was it with Michael Jordan?
At the K Club?
At the K Club.
All right.
Okay. And so we had asked him, would he do an interview? We'd say Irish radio, because he wouldn't know who RT were at the point in time. And did you ever have a moment where it's the most exciting moment in your life and you ask the most stupid question that comes up?
Many, Timmy.
So there's about 1,000 people in an alcove as I'm talking to Michael Jordan, and there's obviously whatever number, 100,000 people listening to this live on radio, and I'm all excited, and Jordan is there, and I say, the most stupid question that could come out of my, what's it like to be in Dublin for the Ryder Cup? And he's about 6'6", and he shrugged his shoulders. He genuinely shrugged his shoulders. The crowd took an inhale of breath, and I'm feeling really lonely now. It's sort of like, okay. And his answer was what my question deserved. He said, it's lovely. The people are lovely. The weather's lovely. The rain is lovely. The grass is lovely. The Guinness, it was all lovely, okay. And I remember at the time, the director in my ear saying, like, this has been cut, like, that's it, like, okay. And I'm saying, I need to resolve this. And so I said, to make the last second shot against Utah in Game 6 and to make a putt to win the Ryder Cup, what's the comparison? And for 3.5 minutes, he just went to a different level.
Great.
He talked about focus, about being in the moment, about having practiced, he told me he was buddies with a lot of these guys and they were at his house. It was just a brilliant. And at the very end I said, well, it's been a lifelong ambition of yours to meet me, Michael, which you've done here today, and an ambition of mine to meet yours. So from Timmy and Michael, high fives and back to the studio. For 3 days, he hugged me and high-fived me every time he passed.
Nice.
You wouldn't know who I am today, which is fine, but for those 3 days...
Did you get to go out for dinner?
No, I didn't get for dinner, I didn't get for a drink, but...
No playing golf for like 10 grand a hole?
Oh, yeah, I couldn't afford that.
Jeez, that's the biggest flex I've heard in a long time now. High fives from Michael Jordan for 3 days in a row at the club.
It was actually, and it was, it's a great lesson though, as a commentator or for anybody. It doesn't always have to go right the first time. It's how you recover, and just, and you, like, this guy's like, you're on your own, like you have to fix it, like otherwise, it's, they're going to take it out. But his intensity when he spoke about that shot, I mean, they beat Utah in Game 6. He stole Utah were a point up. The ball went into Karl Malone down in the low block. He stole the ball from Malone and went down the court and held himself near one of the most famous shots ever to make the shot to win it with 5 seconds to go. And when I asked him about it, he knew I knew him, because that was the difference. He knew then I knew him, and I knew his focus and his intensity.
Go interview the tall basketballer. No, you're somebody who's like, okay, I can communicate with you now.
Yeah. And he was we were in the same zone, and from that point of view, and I did say to him, you're obviously for the Americans. No, my friends, Luke is my buddy. He's with me all the time. So he was very open about his relationship with a lot of the European players, and that's it. He obviously wanted the Americans to win.
Yeah, okay. So that's a nice segue to our last one, which is basketball as well. So this is Kobe in the 2008 Olympic final.
So this is probably the best professional performance I've ever seen when the chips are really down. Okay, this is going to come out in 2 weeks' time on Netflix. There's a new program called The Redeem Team.
Right.
So this is about this actual cup final. Okay, it's not the reason I picked it. I picked it because when you look at it, the background to it, America had come in 92, the Dream Team, and in 96 they won, and in 2000 they won. In the 2002 World Cup, America were beaten by 3 teams. Okay, first time in their professional era, so they were really struggling. They lost in 2004 to Argentina. My first Olympic commentaries game to Argentina in the semi-finals. So first time they were beaten at Olympic level since the professional era. Real big issue. And in 2006, Greece beat them in the World Cup. Okay, and in the 2006 team they had LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony and Dwayne Wade. So they had powerhouses, even though they were young at that point in time. Kobe hadn't played for the USA, and in 2007, because they hadn't won the World Championships, they had to go and qualify in America, in the Americas. So they qualified for the Olympics. That was Kobe's first event. He had won 3 NBA titles with the Lakers, with Shaq O'Neal, but now he had just lost an NBA title without Shaq to the Celtics.
So the debate was at that time, like, was he reliant on having somebody like Shaq in the team? Could he carry a team on his own? Was he the real superstar that everybody was saying?
Because the talk was he was the next Michael Jordan, or was he going to replace Michael Jordan? That was the big debate at that point in time. So he was coming into the Olympics with an American program that was struggling, even though they had brought in Mike Krzyzewski as the coach and from Duke, and he made a big difference to them. And they were playing Spain, who were world champions. So they beat Spain in the group. But 2 things were very interesting. And the Redeem Team, I just saw some highlights of it. Actually, will highlight this. In his first practice session with the team, the first ball broke. He dived on the floor. Now, he's the biggest superstar on this team. And all of a sudden he's going to set the tone like, I'm here for serious business. And in the group match they played Spain, and Pau Gasol was now his teammate at the Lakers instead of Shaq O'Neal. And he said to his players, the first chance I get, I'm going to knock him over. And in the very first play, Gasol set a screen and he took him out.
Right.
Illegally, no, he just took him out illegally. But he sent a message like, you're not my teammate here. You're my brother with the Lakers, but I'm playing for the USA. So we get to the final, and both the top two teams meet in the final, and it's a phenomenal game of basketball, and it's nip and tuck. But the Americans is in trouble. In quarter four, the Spanish had brought it back to a 1-point game without hitting a 3-pointer for about 8 minutes in a row. So they were dominating the game on the inside. The two Gasol brothers, 7-2 each, were dominating the game. And the Americans, LeBron, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, Carmelo, they were kind of hiding, would be my view of it, okay? And Kobe took over the game. He just took over the game. He scored 13 points. When the game was on the line, he made a couple of assists to other people. And that day, in my view, I said, well, this guy is almost as good as Michael Jordan. I believe Jordan's the best I've ever seen. But this guy is almost as good as Michael Jordan, because he did it when it mattered. He did it for his country. Because if they had lost that Olympics, Ger, they would have been in real trouble, because now they'd have lost 4 international tournaments in a row, and it would have questioned the whole professional ethos that had been brought in '92 from the Americans.
It's funny how the team matters more to them than we think it does. That it's not just like a box ticking for the sponsors. That actually, because they're all rich beyond their wildest dreams. So like they don't do it just for extra endorsements from brands who they might not be able to access otherwise. It has to mean something to them, otherwise it's going to be perfunctory, and they're not going to put in performances like this.
Well, Kobe said when he was selected, he said that this is my country. We're playing, this is not, the Lakers or the Celtics or the Mavs or the Heat. Like, this is us playing for our country. And what Coach K did, he brought in Navy SEALs, he brought in Marines to talk to them about what it's like to be in battle for your country. So it was a real big thing. And obviously they were coming into it after losing 3 major tournaments in a row, 2 World Cups and in Olympic Games. So it means more to them. And when you, like, I'm really looking forward to this Redeem Team Netflix program now, because it'll go behind the fact that this was Redeem or really question what the Americans were going to do with the professionals in the Olympics. So it was a phenomenal environment, and they do really step up when they're playing for their country,
It kind of kick-started a period for the Lakers as well, for a couple of years, ironically, with Pau Gasol alongside Kobe as well.
Because they came back and won 2 NBAs then in that sense, together over the next number of years in that sense. So it really kick-started. It elevated his not his career, because he had won it with Shaq obviously, but it kick-started his career, where he now was the man. As you said earlier, there was a question mark, who was the man when Shaq was there in that sense, right? Okay. Scottie Pippen has come out in the last number of years and said he was better than Jordan, so obviously he had a few drinks too much that night when he decided to say that. But but it was Jordan and the cast. Okay, in the Lakers it was Kobe and Shaq. Then after the Olympics, it was Kobe was the main man with the cast. So I think that's what it changed my lens of Kobe. So it wasn't Kobe and Shaq; it was Kobe and the cast, which brought him to the level of Jordan in that sense.
When did you start commentating?
I started commentating in 1991 as my first time involved with RT as an analyst. So I used to do the pre-game view, the halftime view, and then the post-game view. And back then there was no recording, so if you said something at the start of half-time before the game, you could say something different at half-time.
As I said earlier, I absolutely predicted they were going to win.
But then the following year, they asked me, in addition to the analyst role, would I become a co-commentator of the Ger Canning, and I did that then until 2004, and at the 2004 games, I was there a day before Ger Canning. I was to do co-commentary on the men's with Ger and co-commentary with Sean O'Sullivan on the women's. And I was there the day before, and RT said, can you go in and commentate on that game, because there's this program might finish early, right? We need to fill, okay? And I said, I've never commentated. Well, they said, look, it doesn't matter. Just we probably won't see it, but so just go in. And it was a women's game, which went to overtime, and I just commentated as I commentate now, and the director got a phone call and said, you should listen to this. So they played it actually because they'd had to fill. And the next day they said, will you commentate? And Ger went off to do volleyball, and Sean became the analyst.
When you were doing the co-coms, were you the same as you are as a commentator? Were you doing Downtown and Boom Shakalaka? No.
I would say as an analyst, I was people. I remember Ger and Shane, you mentioned him earlier, referred to me as a Conor O'Shea or a Colm O'Rourke, very articulate, but they're different roles. My job as an analyst is to give an expert view on what happens. Okay, why I believe my commentary works in my world is because I played at that level. I've coached at that level. So the game is not in question for me anymore. My job as a commentator, I believe, is to inform and entertain.
Well, I think it's actually more important your enthusiasm for it. Like the love that you have, it comes through. And whether or not you played at the high level, because they're two different skills in a way, Yes. So as an analyst, were you kind of constantly tamping down that part of you that wanted to be like, this is unbelievable, everybody?
Oh no, I would still be very.
But a little part of you weren't accessing a little part of you when
but I was more clinical, I suppose, in the sense, and more not more articulate, because I believe I'm very articulate as a commentator.
And so when the commentary started to happen, did you suddenly realise that this was what I was supposed to be doing?
Yes.
And what's that like? What's that experience?
It's an amazing experience. And then I had an opportunity. I did a few GA games, and because at that time RT were looking at maybe use me in GA, and that really excited me. I did Donegal and Antrim on the day Antrim beat Donegal,
right?
So it became the prime game on Sunday game. I did Waterford and Limerick in the Munster hurling semi-final replay, and I love that because I had a great passion for that as well. So I would love to have done more of that in that sense. Okay. But I just when I did a commentary, I felt much more excited at the end of it, and much more sort of, oh my God, feeling, wow, I should do more of this. It says I love the analyst role, but I really should do more, and I love the co-commentator role, but I really felt I was made to be a commentator.
They're all totally different roles, really, aren't
they?
Yeah,
very different roles.
You mentioned Jimmy McGee earlier, and Eddie Butler's a name that's come up obviously on the show in the last number of weeks as someone who inspired a lot of people to tune into matches. Were there commentators either then or now that you look at in any different sports and say, that they added to the event, I guess?
Well, Jimmy McGee was very helpful to me, actually. When I was starting, and Ger Canning, both of them were actually very helpful to me. Because when the director said we want Timmy to do the commentary, Ger said absolutely, that's a great idea, and he went. But Jimmy McGee said to me, remember, he says that you've got to be yourself. He says, don't try and be anybody else. One of the things that some people make a mistake, they try and imitate. He says, learn from other commentators, he says, in that sense, but be yourself in that sense. So Murray Walker was another guy. I thought Murray Walker's enthusiasm, was just, again, infectious. And, even if you didn't really understand the game, he kept you at the game in that sense. And so they'd be the two that would, that would sort of stand out for me in that sense.
But that makes sense. I think that definitely comes across. Like if there was a basketball game on in the Olympics and it was two teams who you didn't have that much interest or knowledge about, and you were doing the commentary, people were stopping to watch. That was true. Everybody was like, "We're going to watch this. Timmy's on commentary."
And that's very humbling, because because people are watching it who don't understand the game.
No, totally.
And I've always believed, you must be enthusiastic for what you're about. You must have a passion for it in that sense. And, what gives me an advantage is the fact that I played and coached at that level, Ger, is I just know the game a little bit from their perspective. It just gives me a different perspective. I still have to commentate on what I see, but I understand what a player is experiencing or a coach is trying to consider in the context of it. But I just love commentating, and and hopefully there's many more things I can get my hands into.
100%. Timmy, always great to spend time in your company. Thanks a million. That was a great episode of You Had to Be There. Our Twitter poll is in favour of Stephen Kenny, 65% in favour of keeping him. It's live on our Twitter page, @OffTheBall. We'll keep it open until tonight's show as well. And a reminder, we're brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Tomorrow, Keith Woods, Jess McFadden, talking about Singapore, which apparently is a good one, Shane. Mm-hmm. And we'll also look back at the time that Limerick played Real Madrid in Dublin in this September 1980. So again, a trip down memory lane from the League of Ireland vaults. Right now, we're going to leave you with Louth's Mount Rushmore. We'll see you tomorrow. Good luck.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with